I become the Demon King in Marvel. This video is purely for entertainment and does not infringe on copyrights or laws. The rights to the novel and image belong to the original author. We do not claim ownership. Don't like waiting and want to listen to this fanfic in full now? Subscribe to our Patreon, where you'll find the best fanfics. Chapter 201, Sealing Ancient One's Soul. Lin Hao's Super Saiyan 4 form delivered immense attack power, while the Ancient One's defense was weak, leaving her vulnerable to damage and shattering at the slightest touch. However, the bald old nun was like an indestructible cockroach. No matter how many times Lin Hao's power surpassed her defense threshold, she recovered in an instant. Facing the onslaught, the Ancient One continuously repaired her damaged body by drawing upon the power of the Dark Dimension, her soul bathed in the green light of the Avatar. Even a clay figure can be savage, let alone the Sorcerer Supreme. Seeing her soul's continued instability hindering her ability to fight back, she simply abruptly departed from her body and, in spirit form, cast a special transformation spell, once again transporting Lin Hao and Wanda to a distant place. The next moment, Lin Hao and Wanda returned using apparition. The Ancient One glanced at her now recovered form, but instead of returning, she chose to attack from spirit form. The battle once again became intense. No matter how powerful Lin Hao's attacks, the Ancient One could easily shift space and even dimensions. If she missed, even the strongest attacks were meaningless. Even the weakest Ancient One was as formidable as a piece of taffy. If it were the strongest Ancient One in the multiverse, Lin Hao's current combat power wouldn't be enough. Seeing that the Ancient One was gradually becoming accustomed to attacking from his spirit form, Lin Hao quickly sent a message to Onimzar through his demonic contract, begin chanting, just enough for yourself to hear. As he spoke, Lin Hao continuously released dragon-shaped Kigan waves, creating piercing explosions that drowned out Zora's distant voice. Lin Hao and Wanda, still in the battle circle, continued to track the Ancient One as he shifted dimensions. In the distance, Zora chanted, Wall of Iron Sand, Tower of Monk-shaped Tower, Blazing Iron, Aura and ultimately Silence. Binding Technique 75 5 Pillars of Iron. As the creator of this space, Zora could precisely detect the Ancient One's shifting position, so he chanted in advance, unleashing the highest binding technique he could master. 5 iron pillars, chained together, suddenly descended from the sky. The Ancient One, seemingly intent on forcing his way between them, was caught dead. Her head and limbs were crushed by the iron pillars, leaving her unable to move. The Ancient One tried to repeat her old trick, but found that the special transformation magic wouldn't work. She was locked in her spirit form. You're so slippery. It's so hard to catch you, Lin Hao sighed, then laughed heartily. Thankfully, you ultimately succumbed to the power of copyright. What kind of magic is this? The Ancient One was shocked. As the Sorcerer Supreme, the Ancient One knew every bit of magic in the Marvel Universe. Even if she hadn't learned it, she had seen it all. Otherwise, how could she be worthy of the title Supreme? Even the Fire Curse and Avada Kedavra Wanda had just cast, the Ancient One could understand them to some extent, even analyzing some of the similar principles. After all, she was a professional. But she had never seen ghost magic before. There were many magics targeting the soul in the Marvel Universe, but nothing like this. At that moment, the bald old nun realized she had been tricked. The other party had this method specifically designed to control the soul. So the entire battle had been a strategic goal of forcing her soul out. There was nothing wrong with exploiting intelligence gaps, and the old nun could only accept defeat. She was simply curious and frustrated. Lin Hao felt no obligation to explain. He turned to Wanda and said, call someone. 2 golden red circles of light appeared, one leading to Zheng Xian's office, the other to Odin's. The 2 old men stepped through the circles and saw the Ancient One's soul lying motionless on the ground. Isn't this too fast? Odin sighed. Back when he was voluntarily contracted, Lin Hao's strength was nothing to worry about. Yet, it had only been so long, and yet, he had already captured the Sorcerer Supreme. Odin himself wasn't sure he could defeat the Ancient One, yet Lin Hao had managed to capture her alive. Don't talk nonsense, Lin Hao glared at Odin. What do you mean by fast or not? We were just fighting to the death. Someone could die? Odin didn't want to talk, thinking that this unnecessary remark would only lead to misunderstanding. We can't kill her. Zheng Xian was silent for a moment, then suddenly spoke. Once she dies, her soul will be taken by eternity, and we haven't dealt with eternity's power yet. I don't intend to kill her. Lin Hao squatted down so the Ancient One's soul, sprawled on the ground, could better see his expression. With a playful smile, he asked, "Can we continue the conversation now? Do you want to be a traitor?" Zheng Xian's expression changed slightly, and she quickly pressed, "What did you talk about?" "We didn't go into detail, but I just noticed that the Sorcerer Supreme seemed to have other ideas." Lin Hao smiled. "We're getting to know him better," Zheng Xian suddenly realized. Thinking about the fate that the bald old nun version of the Ancient One would face, she began to understand her mindset. Although the bald old nun was a banana, she was also Chinese in the setting, which made her an unlikable character from the start, disliked by fans both in China and abroad. She was simply a tool to introduce strange. An actor might not mind such a script setting, but a real person would inevitably have emotions. "Whatever she thinks, she can't be trusted," Zheng Xian said flatly. "I know, so call the God King." Lin Hao nodded, then turned to Odin and said, "Begin." Place the most powerful seal on her. From the silence, Ancient One suddenly spoke, "I can't contact eternity." "Wait," Lin Hao interrupted Odin, coldly addressing the old nun. "It seems you're trying to make a show of allegiance, but we won't believe you." "It doesn't matter," the old nun suddenly laughed. "Because I can't contact the boss unless I die? What difference does it make where I stay for the next 6 years? Lin Hao frowned, understanding her point. The old nun clearly didn't want to die, otherwise she wouldn't have drawn on the power of the dark dimension to prolong her life. In the plot, fate had forced her to fall, and besides, she wasn't actually going to die, she was simply returning to eternity as a lackey. Unwilling to die, yet unwilling to face the fate of a mere tool, the old nun chose to lie low, hoping Lin Hao would surprise her. If Lin Hao succeeded, she would completely escape her fate, and could then offer more intelligence in exchange for her life. If Lin Hao failed, she would only be imprisoned for 6 years. Yes, only 6 years, because the boss had arranged for her to take over strange 6 years later. Whether Lin Hao succeeded or failed, the outcome would be decided in 6 years. Either she could stick to the original plan or fight for a free future. Either way, she would win. At this moment, the old nun had completely given up on camouflage. As for the invasion of the dimensional demons, it was hilarious. If they dared, they would be completely wiped out by the great demon. Previously, the Ancient One, limited by his lack of offensive power, could only rely on various magics to resist and repel the dimensional demons. Now, Lin Hao's offensive power was off the charts. If the dimensional demons dared to attack, they would all be annihilated. "Ha, you're in for a sure win," Lin Hao sneered, calling to Odin, "Seal her and carry her to old Zheng's office." "What?" Zheng Xian was stunned. "We agreed on that last time," Lin Hao said seriously. "Don't you have a big bed in your office?" "It's definitely big enough for everyone." "Get lost," Zheng Xian glared at him. Odin, however, began to chant. 99 binding paths, forbidden. A vast golden spiritual pressure erupted, and a vast mass of white leather strips appeared from thin air, enveloping Ancient One's soul like a mummy. Nails rained down from the sky, landing on Ancient One's hands and feet. But that wasn't the end of it. The golden spiritual pressure continued to erupt. Number 2, Swastika forbidden. The spiritual pressure formed a chair, and white leather strips bound Ancient One's soul to it. First bend, stop the strangle. The massive strips of cloth wrapped around it again, tightly enveloping it. Second bend, 100 bolts, dozens of iron spikes pierced Ancient One's soul, completely securing it to the chair. "That's enough. Another time will result in death." Lin Hao pushed the chair in front of Zheng Xian and jokingly said, "It's a little tight. Just bear with it, it's okay." Her body is still warm, just a little dark. I had some free time today to look over the comments from the previous week and realized many of you didn't know Chen Huaren. I was wondering why the subscription rate was so low after the update that day. Poor Huaren, a rare example of a normal Chinese person in Marvel. He's never been to America, let alone licked America. He only has less than 20 minutes of screen time, yet he endures betrayal and death, his blood drained, his fireproofing lost, and ultimately, his own self-destruction. It's truly tragic that so few people know about him. Haha, it's true that Chen Huaren's fame isn't as high as Chen Haonen's. P.S. Huaren appeared in Agents of SHIELD, Season 1, Episode 5. I wrote about Chen Huaren and Jia Ying because these two Chinese characters, despite being perfectly normal and not licking America, couldn't escape the arrogance of Marvel's editors, and ended up in such a tragic end. Chapter 202 American Agents Invade Camartage. A mysterious Eastern tycoon's private jet carried Stephen Strange eastward, where he planned to perform a painless appendectomy and easily pocket $1 million. It seemed like a complete rip-off. The Strange of this universe would never know what he'd lost. Meanwhile, another plane took off from New Orleans in the American South, bound for New York. A few hours later, it landed at Valentina de la Fontaine's base, where the on-call personnel had already arranged a convoy for the city. "Countess, we've cordoned off Bleecker Street," a trusted aide whispered as he opened the door for Valentina. "The special operations team is here." Valentina paused, then ordered, "Assign Captain and his team other tasks. Keep them out of the way." When Captain America was resurrected, the government, driven by the difficult times and the frequent occurrence of paranormal events, had once again elevated him to a celestial figure in an effort to restore public confidence. Valentina didn't mind Captain America's holy aura, and her skills were more than enough to wield the sword. She truly served her financial backers wholeheartedly, unlike Nick Fury, who harbored so many hidden agendas. As the saying goes, America belongs to the consortium, not to the poor. The unawakened Fae Captain and Valentina shared common goals. While their approaches might differ, these wouldn't create irreparable rifts. Therefore, Valentina paid close attention to detail, never allowing the Fae Captain to perform any weak tasks that might resent him. The Fae Captain's combat effectiveness was limited, and while 4 or 5 eunuchs who had mastered the Evil-Repelling Sword manual couldn't defeat the Fae Captain, who had already earned the cosmic consciousness's approval, they were more than enough to suppress him and prevent him from breaking out. This glamorous brand could be preserved, and public recognition could be gained through external publicity. Jia Ying's bluntness made Valentina, accustomed to intrigue and conspiracy, wary. She sensed a high probability of violence in the upcoming action, so she eliminated the Fae Captain in advance. The combined combat power of the Fae Captain, Crossbones, and Falcon is no match for a group of Grand Eunuchs. Over time, the East Factory Brigade controlled by America has grown ever larger, gradually spawning numerous geniuses who have mastered the Exorcist sword manual to its limits. The number of Grand Eunuchs has far surpassed last year's. When the power of the state intervenes in the promotion of martial arts, its organizational capabilities and population advantages are unleashed, far surpassing the traditional martial arts schools depicted in fiction. Even the most powerful martial arts schools in fiction cannot match the human resources a major nation can mobilize. Within a vast population base, geniuses will always emerge. Furthermore, researchers will apply rigorous scientific thinking to decipher the laws of energy, developing more efficient training and utilization methods, as well as more effective promotional strategies. The results will undoubtedly surpass the traditional oral transmission of martial arts schools. This is also the model Lin Hao used to promote internal martial arts within the Divine Spear Bureau. Unfortunately, America only has one flawed copy of the Cutting G method. The convoy set off, arriving shortly on Bleecker Street in Greenwich Village. Valentina then cast her gaze upon Jia Ying. Signaling, "It's time to get on board," Jia Ying pushed the door open and stepped out of the car, with Calvin quickly following with their daughter, Daisy. Calvin didn't know his wife's intentions, but he supported her unconditionally, unless the Deus Ex Machina descended and the world consciousness demanded his backstab. Having just reunited with her parents, Daisy sensed their extraordinary qualities and began to realize the weight of fate befalling her family. After all, ordinary people couldn't possibly deserve such a display from the American government. Jia Ying walked towards 177A, an old apartment building. On the surface, it looked like any other, save for a round glass window on the roof with a strange symbol on it. Standing at the door, Jia Ying seemed to wait a moment before it was opened from the inside. The person glanced at her and smiled. Great. The plan was proceeding as Director Lin had intended. The Ancient One had been captured by Lin Hao, and the Sanctuary of Sanctuary in New York had been conquered by the magical agents of the Spear Agency. Now all that was left was to lure the enemy into a trap. Jia Ying turned and smiled at Valentina. "Do you dare to come in?" Hearing this provocative remark, Valentina frowned slightly, then stepped forward with a fierce confidence, grinning. "This is New York." Jia Ying stepped into the sanctuary, followed by Valentina. The agents blocking Calvin and Daisy's way moved away imperceptibly, quickly catching up with the boss. Calvin, who had been blocking his daughter's path, unclenched his fist and turned to Daisy, saying, "Follow us." The magicians originally in the sanctuary had been restrained, replaced by magicians from the SHIE, allowing Jia Ying to lead the group to the magical passage. Step through, and you'll see the true transcendence. Jia Ying smiled, pushing open the wooden door and stepping through the rippled magical barrier. With the SHIE agents already on the scene, she wasn't worried about her husband and daughter falling into Valentina's hands. Seeing Jia Ying suddenly disappear, Valentina was startled and turned abruptly. Behind Calvin and Daisy, the man who had vanished into the restroom at New Orleans Central Hospital reappeared. The next moment, a blue mist of light emerged, carrying the three of them with it. "Capture them," Valentina commanded her henchmen, pointing at the SHIE agents. The SHIE agents smiled and waved, leaving Valentina's men empty-handed. 5 living men vanished right before their eyes. Valentina knew she had little time left, and the passageway before her might soon vanish. After a moment's deliberation, she issued a decisive order: "Those outside, surround this area. Don't let anyone in or out. If anything goes wrong, notify the military immediately to send reinforcements. Leave one team to thoroughly search the building. Don't miss any leads. The rest of you, prepare for battle. Follow me." Nick Fury would probably send his men to gather information first, then personally act when he was certain. However, Valentina was more drastic and fearless. Being a woman had her advantages. In this male-dominated world, she was destined to pose no threat to the financial backers behind the scenes, which was why she was able to gain their trust. Similarly, as a woman, she could only outfight men. After crossing the magical passage, Valentina arrived at an ancient temple, the magical sanctuary of Kamartaj. She quickly took in her surroundings, an instinctive secret agent. She found herself in a stone room. Behind her was an ancient wooden door. To its left and right were 2 other identical doors, each with a slightly different color symbol. Jia Ying, who had been waiting here, suddenly raised a finger to her lips, smiled at them, and deliberately lowered her voice and said, "They are still sleeping now. If you have a chance, send more people over." As she spoke, she pointed to the wooden door behind Valentina, and with a friendly attitude that showed consideration for her, she reminded, "I have fixed the magic on the door for you. It will not disappear in a short time. Come on." When saying the last sentence, Gordon had already sensed the space where Jia Ying was, activated his ability to arrive there, then grabbed her shoulders and took her away. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelis. There you'll find the original version of this story, and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 203, The East Factory Eunuchs Defeat the Magician. This is a trap. This is a conspiracy. The reality before her eyes forced Valentina de la Fontaine to abandon her hopes for the future. Her predictions had been proven true. "Madam, are we retreating?" her subordinate asked hurriedly, his voice lowered. "Retreat? You're kidding?" Valentina gritted her teeth. "If we retreat, we'll never get back in. This must be the lair of some magical power. Ever since Tom Riddle's appearance, Earthlings have come to believe that a hidden magical world exists, though its traces are elusive. Over the past 6 months, the United States has expended countless resources searching the globe, yet, aside from the publicly visible Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry, it has failed to locate any magical strongholds. Even the only known wild magician is the young woman the false captain had detected yesterday. Now, having finally reached a magical powerhouse, how could Valentina retreat? Of all the supernatural powers, the most valuable to a nation or organization is not unique abilities, but replicable knowledge, such as internal cultivation techniques and magical tomes. No matter how powerful superpowers are, they can only create a dictator, and no one likes a dictator. Knowledge that can be copied is different. Even if there are certain qualifications, higher-ups can find many ways to promote and restrict it. The best superpowers are those that are both controllable and safe. Go back and tell them to send reinforcements immediately. Valentina pointed to her trusted subordinates and declared decisively, "No matter where this place is, America will take it down at all costs." To motivate those around her, she added, "After we take down this magical organization, you will all be eligible to be among the first to learn magic. This is my promise to you." Upon hearing this, the agents and eunuchs around her all shone with eagerness. Red Swordsman Adam Smith and White Dwarf Jack Bryan were also part of the operation. As the first eunuch to practice the exorcism sword, Adam had long since reached a bottleneck. Now No matter how hard he practiced, the increase in internal energy was minimal, and he could no longer experience the initial surge in strength. This caused Adam great anxiety. After all, he had long considered Master Dongfang his role model. To one day stand beside Master Dongfang, he needed to continuously improve his strength. Compared to Master Dongfang's mighty power, which could cleave buildings and split the sky with a single sword strike, Adam could only tear down walls at present. Jack, who had consumed the artificial devil fruit, was in even worse shape. Although the fruit created by Lin Hao theoretically had the potential to awaken, he had practiced for 2 years with no clue how to achieve it. Over the past 2 years, Jack's strength had grown slowly, unable to keep up with a rapidly changing world. Both of them had a strong desire to become stronger, but with no other avenues available, they were persuaded by Valentina to join her organization. Feeling the boost in morale, Valentina breathed a sigh of relief. They waited quietly in the stone chamber for several minutes, while those remaining outside the Sanctuary of Sanctuary in New York rushed in, until the chamber was completely empty. Seeing the situation stalled, hindering the battle, Valentina summoned a group of eunuchs and ordered, "Push the door and leave. You will be credited with first-class merit in this operation." She had taken the lead earlier, unsure of the danger and wanting to set an example for her men. Now that it was certain this was the lair of a mysterious magical power, Valentina understood the importance of her position as commander. The eunuchs quietly pushed open the wooden door, revealing an empty courtyard. While it was midday in New York, it was midnight in Kamartaj, nestled in the Himalayas. Lin Hao, determined to further the ambitions of America's elite eagles, even timed them with pinpoint accuracy. The eunuchs leaped out first, seizing advantageous positions within the courtyard. Following them, the operatives filed out, quickly taking combat stances. These men hadn't intended a friendly encounter from the outset. "Who are you?" A magician, awake for the night, was startled awake by the sudden appearance of someone in the courtyard. Just as he was about to shout, he saw a sharp sword flash approaching. With a swish, the blade pierced the magician's throat, completely silencing his voice. Adam withdrew his sword, turned to Valentina, and said with a smile, "We're not here to negotiate today, are we?" Valentina frowned. Although she was displeased with his presumptuous behavior, she had to abandon any remaining thoughts of negotiation. Adam's actions were entirely driven by self-righteousness. He had come without the orders of Dongfang Bubei. In fact, it had been a long time since he had heard the master's voice, even though he prayed frequently. This was why Adam felt so anxious, constantly believing that the master's disregard for him was simply because he was too weak. To become stronger, to maximize his own gains, Adam had taken such a bold action. How much could he gain through peaceful negotiations? And how much would he ultimately receive? Better to fight his way through and seize everything. Even if he were to leave the organization, Adam wouldn't mind. Valentina shared a similar sentiment. Negotiation or violence were merely means to an end. She and America had only one goal, to obtain magical knowledge. If negotiations don't yield what they want, force will ultimately be resorted to. This is just a step skipped. Besides, showing up in the middle of the night at someone's lair, claiming to be here for friendly exchanges, still has to be believed, right? When Valentina's men attempted to storm the front yard, Kamartaj's night watchman was finally alerted. "Who are you?" Without a word, the night watchman shot a dazzling ball of magical light into the sky. It exploded, emitting a piercing alarm. 2 eunuchs attacked from either side. The alarm awoke the entire city of Kamartaj, and countless mages, not even able to dress, rushed out of their bedrooms, clutching the hanging rings. As a bulwark against dimensional invasions, Kamartaj had specialized early warning training. Some of the older mages had even personally experienced dimensional monster invasions, giving them ample experience. Swordsman Squadron, immediately seize the commanding heights. Action Squadron, fire freely, inflict as much damage as possible. Valentina was an excellent commander. Having decided on force, she held back. Under her command, the Swordsman Brigade was undoubtedly the strongest force. After nearly 2 years, the first batch of eunuchs who had undergone training had already become full-fledged eunuchs. Their skills had reached a limitless level, yet their combat prowess was no less impressive. In single combat, they could even match Captain America. These eunuchs, swords in hand, leaped onto the roof of the ancient temple in a single step, charging towards the surrounding towers. The mages, unable to fly, had to create light shields for support, leaping up step by step, slowing them down. "Stop them," the elder mage shouted, taking the lead and launching a shimmering golden magic chain. However, the characteristic of the exorcist's sword technique was speed, both in terms of movement and agility. The mages of Kamartaj were at most comparable to trained ordinary men, and compared to the eunuchs who had practiced the exorcist's sword technique for a year or two, they were as slow as a snail. The shimmering golden magic chain swung past, not even catching the exhaust of a car. Mages with limited magical skills and no knowledge of spatial transformation were powerless against the eunuchs who practiced the sword technique of exorcism. In the blink of an eye, several eunuchs seized commanding positions at the four corners of the temple. Gunfire erupted as ordinary agents opened fire, killing and wounding mages who had no time to dodge or raise their shields. Chapter 204 American Soldiers vs. Kamartaj Magicians. Gunfire pierced the tranquility of Kamartaj. Baron Mordo, a disciple of the Ancient One, became the strongest of Kamartaj's current magicians and its temporary leader. Mr. Mordo, please contact the Ancient One immediately. The invaders are formidable, and there have been significant casualties. Baron Mordo's face was grim, having repeatedly tried to contact the Ancient One without a response. The Ancient One has more important matters. These invaders are merely earthlings. We must repel them on our own. Mordo, helpless, could only defend the Ancient One. Kamartaj in the film and television universe has been significantly weakened. Ordinary magicians are barely faster than ordinary humans, and even jumping off a building can kill scores of people. Not only is their strength impressive, but their defense is so impressive that even a dog would shudder. This is a common problem in American comics, overemphasizing the strength of the main characters without a core group, like a master leading a group of novices. Now that the Ancient One is gone, Kamartaj is not simply leaderless, it has lost most of its power. If the invaders attacked from outside, they could still hold out for a while thanks to the magical barrier surrounding Kamartaj. But now that the enemy had emerged directly from within, the mages had lost their greatest defensive power. Even shields held by ordinary mages wouldn't hold out for long against the powerful weapons wielded by the American agents. Those skilled in special magic, stepped forward. The older magician, seeing the situation was unfavorable, shouted, "Send the invaders away." Only after someone stepped forward to take command did the panicked mages begin to deploy according to their training. All mages skilled in special magic immediately began to form a circle, and a golden-red halo suddenly appeared beneath the agents' feet. A moment later, screams rang out. Armed agents, in groups of 3 or 4, fell into the portal, disappearing where they had been. Damn it, despite being the leader, Valentina was no slouch. Her keen combat awareness gave her advance warning before the portal took shape, allowing her to leap inside dive, dodging the portal beneath her feet. Swordsman, concentrate your fire. Kill those who use special magic. At this point in the battle, peaceful engagement was no longer possible. Valentina only needed to leave behind a few mages who knew magic. With the exception of the chief eunuch occupying the high ground, the others rushed forward at full speed upon receiving the order. They had already determined that the enemy's speed was completely outmatched. With enough speed, they could kill or evade the enemy without any problem. This operation was a complete success. Once they obtained the magic books, they too would learn magic. Swords flashed, accompanied by the screams of the mages. The mages controlling the portals tried to repeat their previous tricks, but found that their speed was too slow to lock onto the eunuchs. Still foolishly drawing circles, the mages' swords pierced their throats. By the time Baron Mordo arrived at the courtyard, the mages had suffered heavy casualties, and he was furious. These were his future squad. Before Stephen Strange showed up, Mordo had always believed he would be the next Sorcerer Supreme. After all, no one else's experience or magical prowess matched his. Shit, Mordo immediately took action. Repositioning his men and avoiding the onslaught of the East Depot eunuchs. Follow my orders, raise your seraphim shields, keep your distance, and avoid close combat. His intervention garnered the unanimous support of all the mages. They formed a square formation, with the outermost layer raising their shields, forming a hemisphere that protected their comrades. Mages skilled in portals continuously cast spells on ordinary agents, catching each one and alleviating the pressure. Finally, mages in the dense formation launched chains, attempting to capture the approaching eunuch. The East Depot eunuchs were no fools. Seeing the division of labor in the hedgehog formation, they rushed forward a few times without success, but stopped foolishly. The scene on the other side of the portal was simply too terrifying. Initially, portals dropped people into cities, forests, and mountains, offering a chance of survival even if they fell. Later, the mages grew increasingly enraged, opening portals directly into glaciers, oceans, and even volcanic craters. Falling through them would guarantee certain death. After witnessing a careless eunuch being caught by a magical chain swung by Mordo, thrown into the portal leading to the volcanic crater, and then released, the eunuch stopped charging. Far away, hiding behind a training stone lock, Valentina saw the situation was deteriorating. She immediately called out to her men within the stone chamber, call for reinforcements. Moments later, more armed fighters emerged from the chamber. Outside the sanctuary in New York, the American military, having received the news, had already dispatched a large force, surrounding Bleecker Street. Teams of heavily armed Special Operations Forces rushed into the sanctuary and lined up in front of the portal. Ordered to reinforce, the soldiers filed in. In terms of manpower, even if they exhausted the mages of Kamartaj, they would still be able to defeat the soldiers of the imperfect United States. The military arrived, bringing with them powerful portable weapons. Individual missiles rained down relentlessly on the magician's formation. Although portals continued to appear beneath the soldiers' feet, causing casualties, the American military, leveraging their numerical superiority, bravely managed to land their missiles on the magicians' heads despite the losses. Fuck, Mordo, having witnessed the power of missiles, quickly launched a massive aerial portal, connecting directly to the skies above the Sanctuary in New York. He had already recognized the invaders as American. Missiles pierced through the portals, suddenly appearing above the Sanctuary in New York, and descended upon the decrepit building. The explosions alerted the surrounding troops and agents. Valentina's trusted subordinates, specially retained, immediately shouted, "Secure the magical portals, fight back, destroy the missiles." The military commanders reacted with remarkable speed, realizing the enemy was cutting off their supply. Without the magical portals within the sanctuary, their forces would be ready for slaughter. The American military and secret agents engaged the magicians of Kamartaj in a frenzy of back and forth. However, Adam Smith, the Red Swordsman who was supposed to lead the assault, quietly left the team and infiltrated Kamartaj's chambers, searching for the magical tome he coveted. He was joined by many others, such as Jack Whitedog Bryan and several eunuchs who had reached a plateau in their practice of the evil-defeating sword manual. These were restless individuals. During their operations, they occasionally encountered each other. Upon seeing each other emerge from their rooms, they exchanged a wary glance before continuing their search of other rooms. Soon, Adam reached the outside of the Ancient One's library, only to discover a standoff ensuing inside. Chapter 205 The Brainwashed Librarian. The library is nestled deep within the ancient temple of Kamartaj. Upstairs lies the Ancient One's chamber, a truly secure location. Even when the Sorcerer Supreme is occasionally absent, the library maintains a powerful librarian. Coincidentally, this librarian is also Chinese. Wang Kexun, are you betraying your position? The fat man surnamed Wang said, his eyes flickering. I'm not, no, the SHIE magic agent sneered. You idiot who forgot your mother tongue, you still have this excuse. No, anyone could see the struggle Fatty Wang was feeling. He clutched a magic book, his fingers tense, veins bulging as he guarded his conviction. The Sorcerer Supreme is great. She has always protected Earth. Fatty Wang, of Chinese descent, was one of SHIE's agents who had infiltrated Kamartaj. There were several such agents. Of course, in the presence of the Ancient One, a master of soul magic, these agents were actually visible, a tacit understanding between the Ancient One and SHIE, a few of whom had existed in each generation for centuries. The Ancient One knew that Zheng Xian, who could communicate with the multiverse, already possessed a complete set of Kamartaj's magical tomes and had no need to covet her possessions. The few pawns planted there were more like a veiled warning to this white-skinned, white-hearted Ancient One against any actions detrimental to China. The old nun, fully aware of her fate as a tool, had maintained strict neutrality for centuries, refraining from interfering with China's historical course until the emergence of Lin Hao, a freak. Now that the Ancient One was sealed, the Spear's agents, under orders from their superiors, descended upon the library to reclaim the powerful and mildly harmful tomes, retaining only those that communicated with the dark dimensional demons. In short, Lin Hao intended to reclaim Kamartaj's white magic, retaining the harshly harmful black magic as spoils for the Americans. However, the librarian, Fatty Wang, was captivated by the Ancient One's charisma and betrayed his position. After all, he was the next Sorcerer Supreme, appointed in a time of crisis, and his brainwaves were in tune with the Banana Man. "She's the only one who can protect Earth?" the SHIE agent shouted angrily. "What arrogant American thinking! We already have the ability to defend our country and the entire planet on our own. We don't need to rely on the protection of white dogs. If she were truly great, she wouldn't be drawing on the power of the dark dimension to prolong her life." "Fatty Wang, you're insulting the very profession of librarian." Fatty Wang struggled internally with the accusations and admonitions of his colleagues. This feeling of being pointed at by everyone, of being neither a human nor a human, tormented him. Unfortunately, having been assimilated into American thinking, he ultimately chose to cling to the beliefs he had held for years. The Sorcerer Supreme may have flaws, but Earth can't live without her. Forget it. Several SHIE agents exchanged glances and shook their heads. "Go ahead, he's hopeless." The next moment, Scarlet Chain swung towards Fatty Wang, and two SHIE mages charged at him at speeds far exceeding those of Kamartaj's mages. Shucked, Fatty Wang summoned a light shield, but the two men's punches shattered it. Apparently, the magicians of the SHIE agency possessed not only magical prowess but also internal cultivation, mastering both magic and martial arts. Fatty Wang, who had been undercover in Kamartaj long ago, was unable to enjoy the benefits offered by Director Lin. Scarlet chains entangled Fatty Wang's hands and feet, and the SHIE magic agent punched him in the chest. His ribs collapsed, and blood flowed from his mouth and nose. "Alice," the SHIE magic agent sighed, "why bother? Maybe he's seeking death," another colleague lamented. "He clearly wants to betray, but his heart isn't in it. Take him back, we're colleagues after all." After clearing the obstacles, the SHIE agents quickly packed up the white magic books as assigned, leaving only the black magic books. Their movements were swift and hasty, seemingly unaware of Adam Smith, who was hiding outside. They quickly vanished through the portal with a collection of magic books. Adam, watching them disappear from the portal, waited a moment, and when he saw that the enemy hadn't returned, he drew his sword and rushed in. Seeing the remaining magic books on the shelf, he couldn't tell whether they were good or bad, so he immediately grabbed a few and quickly retreated without compromising his own movements. After he left, other eunuchs who had been slacking off also entered the area. Soon, the library, which had once been half-stocked, was reduced to a few thin-looking books. Unable to distinguish good from bad, the eunuchs could only judge by appearance. The thicker the book, the richer its content. As more and more American soldiers passed through the magical passage, the pressure on the magicians grew. Although a large number of shells were diverted by the portal, some still slipped through and landed on their magic shields. In Marvel, all energy systems interact with each other. Whether magic, technology, or divine power, they are essentially the application of energy, so no one method is completely immune to another. In the technologically based Marvel world, there is no energy that cannot be detected by technology, which means that any power can be analyzed and studied by technology. No single spell can defy the laws of physics. When the American soldiers' shells hit the magic shield, they still caused damage. After suffering heavy casualties, the magicians' shields faltered. One more bombardment and we're done. Baron Mordo, perched on the rooftop, saw a steady stream of American soldiers emerging from the teleportation chamber and knew the situation was over. Kamartaj's manpower was ultimately limited. He had attempted to open the portal to the chamber directly, closing or destroying the magical passageway to eliminate the enemy's source, but he discovered the chamber was enveloped by a magical barrier, rendering all spatial magic ineffective. Clearly, this time, the forces targeting Kamartaj weren't limited to the Americans. "Let's retreat," Mordo shouted. "Remember, our enemy is America." He then drew a circle before the crowd, linking it to a forest. "Move." In that final moment, Mordo displayed the style and prowess of a disciple of the Ancient One, opening the portal and independently holding up the magic shield. After all the magicians had departed, Mordo gazed at the growing number of American soldiers in the courtyard below. With a vengeance in his heart, he brazenly opened a massive portal in the courtyard's ground, sending most of the soldiers plummeting. Below him lay the boiling volcanic lava. After opening the portal, he leaped into the smaller portal beside him and vanished from the ancient temple's roof. The battle finally ended, and another wave of heavily armed soldiers arrived in Kamartaj through the magical portal. Valentina de La Fontaine, hiding from the crowd, let out a long, stale breath. She hadn't even had time to calculate the casualties of the operation. Her own task force had been decimated, and the military troops were being teleported away as quickly as they arrived. In less than half an hour of fighting, the Americans had lost at least 10,000 elite warriors. This was a greater loss than in a major Middle Eastern campaign. Yet, they ultimately prevailed. Victory belongs to America. But as she entered the library to savor the fruits of her victory, Valentina lost her composure. Who is it? Who did it? A sharp cry echoed over Kamar Taj where the smoke had not yet dissipated. Chapter 206 The Magician's Counterattack. Upon discovering the theft, Valentina immediately ordered the ancient temple sealed off. Specifically, the magical passages within the stone chamber were placed under the watchful eye of her few remaining trusted subordinates, who strictly monitored entry and exit. Unfortunately, Adam Smith, the fastest of the group, had already quietly slipped back into the chamber with the loot. Before she could detect the situation, he had traversed the soldiers' route back to the Sanctuary of Sanctuary in New York, brazenly fighting his way through the encirclement and now vanished without a trace. Only then did Valentina realize that the Red Swordsman's heart had never been with her, having only used her as a tool in his quest for new power. Adam's heart belonged to Master Dongfang Bei, and she was merely a toady, providing him with shelter and funds. As for the other eunuchs, some found mirrors leading to other dimensions within Ancient One's chamber, while others found gates to Kathmandu, Nepal, but these were only one-way tickets. Some, however, fled the room, ultimately being surrounded by soldiers armed with powerful weapons. Countess, I was actually trying to protect these books. White Jack Bryan, weak and unlucky, immediately untied the bag from his back and said angrily, "You said I was qualified to study in the first batch, so of course I have to protect our spoils." Valentina's mouth twitched, and she suppressed her anger, forcing a sneer. "Yes, I did. So, will you please return the things to me?" The other party was a psychic after all, and still had some use. Since she was afraid to act rashly, she had to suppress her feelings for the time being and deal with him later. Brian knew this matter wasn't over, but it was his bad luck that he couldn't find a way out. In the film and television universe, Kamar Taj is an ancient temple located in the southern foothills of the Himalayas, but it is surrounded by a magical barrier. It is also the front line against dimensional invasion. Unless the foundation of the magic circle is destroyed, the magic barrier will not disappear even if all the magicians leave. The soldiers searched for a long time, but couldn't find a proper exit. Instead, a few unfortunate souls lost contact after stepping through a door or a mirror, and even the outside command couldn't pick up their signals. Don't wander around. Gather everything you can carry and bring it back to New York. Valentina didn't dare waste any more time. She hadn't forgotten the reason for tonight's battle. This was a trap set for her. If the magical passage disappeared, her men would be trapped here forever. The Anglo-Saxon bandits, using their ancestral skills, removed everything they could from Kamar Taj, smashed what they couldn't, and set it ablaze before leaving. Valentina didn't stop them. The casualties of tonight's battle were heavy. Although the soldiers were like fuel for the battle, those behind couldn't see the soldiers in front of them falling into the abyss, the sea, and the crater, but they could still feel the tension. After all, if the battle was going smoothly, there would be no need for constant reinforcements. The soldiers were simmering with anger, and they needed to vent. Looting, smashing, and burning were the easiest ways to vent their anger. Unfortunately, all the female sorcerers in Kamar Taj had vanished, otherwise some American soldiers would have been left behind. As the American soldiers packed up and returned to New York via a magical portal, Baron Mordo returned alone to Kamar Taj and saw the ancient temple engulfed in flames. Kamar Taj, once peaceful and tranquil, was now ravaged by the raging inferno. "Damn Americans," Mordo roared in shrill fury. He immediately cast his magic, summoning a torrential rain to extinguish the flames within Kamar Taj. These fires were merely ordinary flames, fueled by gasoline, unsupported by magical energy, making them easy to extinguish. Though the blazes burned briefly, they had already reduced the ancient temple to charred ruin. Even after extinguishing them, Mordo's rage was reignited. He endured for a moment, but the more he thought about it, the more fury he felt. Without a word, he descended upon the sanctuary of the Holy of Holies in New York, intent on striking back at the Americans. Gazing at the sanctuary surrounded by the army and the soldiers carrying the spoils, Mordo let out a sinister laugh. "Very well, I'll send you to hell. He donned a ring and made a circle with his hands, sending the entire surrounding city block plummeting into the mirror dimension. Standing on a floating piece of land, Mordo smiled at the panicked American soldiers. Round 2 begins. With his words, the tall buildings lining the streets simultaneously tilted and collapsed, spinning like gears, crushing the panicked soldiers. Open fire, counterattack, the military commander barked orders. He was probably the most frustrated. He had just reported to his superiors that the battle was over and a large amount of magical loot had been seized, only to be ambushed by the remnants of the magicians in the blink of an eye. He couldn't bear this humiliation. The soldiers raised their guns, and the tank drivers turned their guns in the same direction. But in the next second, the ground flipped, transforming into a vertical wall. All the soldiers standing on the street, as well as the armored vehicles and tanks parked on the road, plummeted, as if falling into an endless abyss. On the floating continent, Mordo unleashed his magic, transforming the buildings lining the streets into spinning blades, slicing at the American soldiers. Damn, these magics are bizarre. Valentina, also caught in the mirror dimension, no longer cared to conceal her strength. She unleashed her own stamina to the fullest, leaping from the crumbling, twisting walls, dodging attacks and finding a foothold. White Dog Brian fared much better. He transformed into his beastly form, nimbly twirling and leaping through the magical kaleidoscopic mirror dimension with ease. Mordo's counterattack quickly dispatched the ordinary soldiers gathered on Blake Street. The remaining woman, dog, and eunuchs relied on their agility to dodge the attacks from the mirror dimension. Damn it, these fleas are so good at hiding. After another struggle, Mordo found himself unable to defeat these agile creatures and gave up. After 2 intense battles, Mordo's energy and magic power had been largely depleted. Americans, listen up, Mordo shouted to the survivors. The revenge of Kamartaj has only just begun. With that, the mirror dimension vanished, Mordo departed through the portal, and the survivors reappeared on Blake Street. Aside from the upper levels of the sanctuary, which had been destroyed by the bombardment, the street remained intact. However, the soldiers who had remained on the street had vanished, leaving only a few of them. Wow, what amazing magic, Jack Bryan said with a strange grin. I want to learn. The greater the losses suffered by America, the more needed is fighting power. Bryan was well aware of this. Madam, some more magic books have been lost, said the confidant of the eunuch, whom she had painstakingly trained, with a bitter face. Valentina had just handed the most important magic books to these skilled and loyal eunuchs. These eunuchs were not transgender individuals recruited from the public, but rather trusted subordinates who had ruthlessly committed suicide. They had been Valentina's minions for many years, and after receiving the Evil-Repelling Sword technique, they chose to commit suicide for her. Back to base, Valentina quickly corrected herself. No, to the safe house. Mordo's sudden, unexpected turn left Valentina no longer trusting the base's apparent existence. Facing magic, ordinary people like them were simply no match. We must master magic as soon as possible. This is learning from the enemy to defeat them. Chapter 207, How the American Eagle Learns Magic. This brief yet intense battle shocked the American elite. What? Over 12,000 casualties? The Pentagon's generals were incredulous. It was barely an hour. Even the Battle of the Ardennes didn't kill that quickly. What did we get? Just a few crappy books? Is today April Fool's Day, Watford? You're telling me there are still remnants of the enemy left, ready to retaliate at any moment? Who's the commander? I'll shoot him. Little Patton? Killed? Well, at least he lived up to his name. Why? Why did this damn battle happen, breaking into a magic lair with guns, in the middle of the night? So that's why the fighting broke out. As the news spread, the Pentagon, Congress, and the White House were abuzz with controversy and accusations. The financial backers behind the scenes were also furious with Valentina de la Fontaine. But putting themselves in her shoes, given the circumstances, they saw nothing wrong with Valentina's decision. She had finally gained access to the magical stronghold, and now she was just going to do nothing and just run back? What a joke. Is this the American way? If that were the case, Valentina would be ruthlessly abandoned. America's financial backers don't care how many soldiers die, they only care about the benefits they can reap, and even more so, whether the backlash will endanger them. If Valentina hadn't done anything and just left Kamartaj, it would have been incompetent. Those financial backers wouldn't keep a useless dog. As for friendly contact, it was impossible from the moment Valentina barged in armed in the dead of night. Why? Because Americans are empathetic. Ordinary Americans would be wary of a stranger breaking into their home late at night. If the stranger was armed, the owner could fight back without facing criminal liability. This has long been the unspoken rule in American society, as ingrained as stop at red lights, go at green lights. Putting themselves in their shoes, how could the magician believe they were seeking friendly contact when they saw them sneaking in late at night with guns? It's better to strike first than to let the magician make the first move. This is the spirit of free America. Damn that Asian woman. I'll kill her. Unaware of the true mastermind behind this, Valentina directed all her anger at Jia Ying, believing the Asian woman to be the one setting her up. They had deliberately chosen to bring her to the magician's lair in the dead of night to prevent any peaceful contact between her and the magicians. She was wary, so she couldn't have been unarmed. They had clearly anticipated her reaction and the direction of the situation. Furious as she was, the current dilemma must be resolved quickly. The magicians of Kamartaj were already clamoring for revenge, and America must master the power of magic as soon as possible. Mr. Brian, I promised you would be the first to experience magic. Valentina, not forgetting his previous actions, went along with it and used White Dog as her first test subject. Now is the time for me to fulfill my promise. I wonder if you're willing. With a chuckle, he sneered, or rather, do you still dare? Jack Bryant stared at the old woman, then swaggered forward and said proudly, why not? If he backs down today, the other party would undoubtedly seize the opportunity to deprive him of his share of the spoils and continue to find fault with him. Would that be a huge loss? Brian had no choice but to hope that he could quickly master the power of magic. Very good, follow me. Valentina led the way, followed by her trusted eunuchs, as if escorting Brian. They entered the safe house's laboratory. While the lab wasn't as impressive as the base, today's research was limited to a few ancient books. The initial participants weren't science PhDs, but rather, they were all humanities PhDs. Valentina had invited the best semioticians, theologians, cryptographers, sociologists, archaeologists, and others. Upon learning that she had seized the magic book, the financial backers temporarily withheld their blame, deciding to wait for the results before deciding on rewards or punishments. With the financial backers paving the way, Valentina gathered this group of scholars in record time. Incredible. These books are at least 1,000 years old. Several archaeologists gathered around the magical books on the table, wearing gloves and equipped with specialized equipment to examine and interpret them. The decoration on the cover has an ancient Greek style, but the dating doesn't match. Is it because the books are in such good condition? No, the equipment we have is simply not enough to accurately determine the age. I need to take samples and bring them back to my lab for professional testing. Madam, are you in charge here? We must take the books back for research. Hearing these old scholars' words, Valentina summoned her last bit of patience and emphasized, don't worry about the history of these books. I didn't invite you here to give me a history lesson. I need the content of the books. Please decipher the text as quickly as possible. I want to know what it says. You're wrong. We've finally acquired archaeological data that surpasses the East. How can we write our papers if we don't thoroughly understand their age and determine their place in history? The old scholars began to object, with good reason. That's right. Did you know that we in the West have always been outshined by the East? Sometimes we're even forced to forge artifacts. This is a key component in enhancing national pride and has immense propaganda value. Ever since the economic development of that great Eastern nation, archaeological discoveries have exploded. After all, their history is so long that any artifact they pull out is older than America's. Forget America, even if Britain and all of Europe were combined, they wouldn't be able to match them in the field of archaeology. Forced to do so, they resort to gimmicks. Whenever a world-shaking archaeological discovery emerges in the East, they'll also conveniently produce one or two ancient artifacts, leveraging their superior information channels to extensively publicize the glorious history of Western civilization. What the East has, the West must have too. We absolutely cannot be outdone. They used to have fakes, but now they have the real thing, and why shouldn't they write some good articles? Valentina's patience ran out, and she whipped out her gun, slamming it down in front of the old scholars. I repeat, one last time, I want the information in the book, accurate information, immediately. After her harsh words, she didn't forget to give the old scholars a sweet treat. If you give me what I want, you can take these books and study them however you want, publishing as many papers as you want, I can also help you contact publishers and even buy your first batch of research. Is that a partnership? The old scholars glanced down at their pistols, then back up at Valentina's serious expression. Knowing that a scholar would meet a soldier, they acted decisively. They abandoned their search for the book's age and appearance and focused on deciphering the text. This is Hebrew, Seth, son of the great god of life. Chapter 208, Marvel's mythological background. Faced with the violent coercion of Valentina de La Fontaine, the scholars set to work translating the characters within the magical tome. The mysterious ancient secrets unfolded before them, overturning their previously held beliefs and perspectives. Unbelievable. Could this be? Seeing the government agencies in such a frenzy, surrounded by a phalanx of skilled agents guarding the area with guns, the scholars inevitably had absurd thoughts. Is this all true? According to the records they had read, the first living being in the universe was named the Creator, also known as the God of Life. Upon his visit to Earth, he combined his life force with the natural forces of the biosphere to create a host of ancient gods. These included the underworld god Sithan, the earth goddess Gaia, Biladazzle, Harps, and the serpent god Set. These ancient gods flourished during Earth's early formation. Initially, under the Creator's watch, they behaved docilely until the serpent god Set murdered Harps, achieving the feat of Earth's first murder. From then on, the serpent god Set fell into demonism, ushering in the age of demons. Most of the ancient gods became demons and began slaughtering and devouring each other, turning the earth into hellish hell. Gaia, the earth goddess and Mother Earth, representing the earth's natural energy, was displeased. She slept with a god of life, who had created her own, and gave birth to the sun god Adam. Adam proved immensely powerful, successfully wiping out the rebellious old gods. The combined forces of the underworld god Sithan and the serpent god Set were no match for Adam, and seeing the situation looming, they fled to other dimensions. The old god's essence is a combination of the Creator's life force and the earth's natural energy, meaning that energy can be combined and that each old god can nourish the others. Later, Adam naturally discovered this secret. Devouring the old gods would increase their divine power, a temptation few old gods could resist. Thus, Adam transformed into the God-Eater, consciously devouring the old gods, even those who hadn't caused any rebellion. He became addicted. Seeing their son's disobedience, Gaia and the Creator joined forces to defeat him and cast him into the sun. They then forced Adam to merge with his son, transforming him into true sun god. His self-consciousness was extinguished, and the natural energy he devoured was returned to Earth in the form of sunlight. Billions of years later, the female celestial beings visited the Luoyang. Zheng Heng, wielding the divine spear, suggested that she place her son into the sun. Forced by the threat of the spear, the female celestial beings adopted Zheng Heng's advice. Over time, the power of the God-Eater gave rise to a new generation of Earth gods, including the Jade Emperor, the Antarctic Immortal, the Black Panther Goddess, Amaterasu, and Shivara. Unlike the ancient gods, these native gods could not devour each other for strength. Instead, they relied on the faith of Earth's people. They again engaged in wars to gain the power of faith. Finally, at the initiative of Odin and Zeus, they formed the Council of the Gods to negotiate and divide their respective territories and share the devotion of their inhabitants. Around 3,000 to 4,000 years ago, a new generation of Earth's native gods also left the planet, either traveling to other star regions or hiding in nearby dimensions. They descended only in response to the prayers of their followers, their divine presence or projections. What can you infer from these settings? Indeed, Gaia, Mother Earth, often uses her sewers to save the Earth, worthy of her title as the Earth Goddess. The Jade Emperor, having endured 1,750 tribulations, each lasting 129,600 years, not only donned Japanese samurai armor but also degenerated to a mere 4,000 to 5,000 years of lifespan, becoming a mere folly, reduced to a mere cry of quickly summon the Tathagata Buddha. Keep working, an older, more prestigious scholar whispered. These people aren't ordinary government agents. Better get what they want quickly. Alright, the other scholars suppressed their confusion and surprise and continue translating. The great serpent god Set resides in the Serpent Sea, a realm imbued with divine power. Set is one of the most powerful demons in existence. His visits to Earth are generally restricted, allowing him to bestow only sporadic power upon his followers who summon his name. His power can also be summoned through numerous artifacts constructed for him, such as the Serpent Crown, the Golden Serpent, and the now powerless Cobra Crown. Through these channels, the serpent god Set can even enslave entire nations, even the world, and grant his followers immense psychic power. Valentina, who had been listening, immediately interjected, "What is the summoning ritual? Where is the so-called artifact?" "Wait a moment," the scholar translating quickly flipped through the pages until they found the one depicting the mysterious pattern. "That should be the pattern, but it requires the summoner's own blood as a medium." As he spoke, the scholars exclaimed, "My God! How much blood would be needed for such a large pattern? This is pure murder." They increasingly felt that these ancient texts containing occult teachings were unreliable and unscientific. But Valentina didn't care. She snatched the magic book away and handed it to Jack Bryan, saying with a smile, "Don't say I didn't give you a chance. Now you have the chance. It's up to you to choose." Bryan, without another word, took the magic book and walked into an open space. Animal-type devil fruits greatly enhance physical fitness. Even the abnormal physiques of the pirate world can be instantly enhanced many times over, let alone ordinary people in the Marvel world. Others feared excessive blood loss, but Bryan wasn't worried. After reviewing the symbols in the book several times, he picked up an alloy knife, forcefully cut his finger, and began to imitate them. With his healing ability far superior to that of an average person, Bryan's finger healed after a while, and he had no choice but to cut it again. He continued to cut and cut, for over an hour before finally creating the pattern. To find more beacons and invade Earth, the dimensional demons often have very low requirements for summoners. No magical power is required, only blood. Some don't even require human blood, pigs, cows, or even chicken's blood will do. The focus is on convenience and universality. "Great Serpent God said, please descend upon me." Bryan drew the pattern and sat in the center, repeating the phrase repeatedly according to the instructions in the magic tome. After a long moment, just as Valentina and Bryan, the person involved, were about to lose their patience, the blood symbol on the floor began to tremble. "Camera, check it." Valentina quickly turned and instructed her subordinates. "Madam, don't worry," the subordinates immediately replied, "we're recording everything." The blood, which had begun to dry and scab over, suddenly regained its vitality, like waves suddenly rising from a calm sea. The swirling blood flowed back to Bryan at the center, forming runes that covered his entire body in the blink of an eye. After a dozen seconds, the blood-constructed runes suddenly pierced Bryan's skin, turning the white skin red like a boiled lobster. Just as Valentina and the others were in a state of confusion, Bryan's body suddenly began to tremble and float. Kneeling, Bryan gradually rose into the air, soon reaching over 2 meters above the ground. Less than 2 minutes later, as if his energy had run out, Bryan suddenly fell from mid-air. Lin Hao, who had been observing the unfolding events through the demonic contract, scratched his head. "That's it, Marvel has a lot of adherent premises, so this book will roughly follow this one, with more plot details to come." Chapter 209 I Demon, Gaohua, Ancient One is Dead? By reviewing Jack Bryan's memories and sensing his soul, Lin Hao clearly saw the changes in him. The energy channeled by the serpent god set from across dimensions only remained within Bryan's body, unable to reach his soul, as Lin Hao had already taken control of it. After all this fuss, he only gained the ability to levitate, and it's time limited. Lin Hao felt sorry for his dog. The serpent god set could bestow upon his followers abilities such as levitation, super strength, telekinesis, and mind control. Lin Hao wasn't at all worried about him imbuing his followers with super strength, as the serpent god set's force was set at only 100 tons. Using 100 tons of force through his serpent's head and tail was certainly impressive. But how many tons of force would it take to push the moon? How many tons of force would it take to fling a stone pillar over 2,000 kilometers, with a person standing on it and flying? In the unscientific world of Dragon Ball, a mere 100 tons of force was nothing. Forget Dragon Ball, even in the world of One Piece, even the consumption of an animal-type devil fruit would yield over 100 tons of force. Lin Hao was more concerned with telekinesis and mind control. "Are you relieved now?" Zheng Xian said on the Den Den Mushi video feed. Serpent God said is only a demon god of a single universe, unable to transcend the multiverse. Although it's one of the oldest gods, its connection to Earth is weak, and its power isn't strong. With your ability to defeat Ancient One, even if the Serpent God himself arrives, we can handle it. Zheng Xian didn't observe the battle between Lin Hao and Ancient One until the very end. He didn't know the true combat power of Super Saiyan 4, and Lin Hao wasn't really worried about these so-called demon gods of a single universe. From the observation point of view, Bryan was quickly taken to an empty room for testing. Brian constantly changed forms, but it was discovered that his power didn't increase, only that he gained the ability to levitate temporarily. For White Dog, exchanging some blood for levitation wasn't a loss, at least it increased his mobility. Moreover, he didn't know that because his soul had been sold to the Great Demon King, Serpent God said couldn't penetrate his soul at all. The wisp of consciousness that descended, unable to find a home, naturally dissipated, effectively giving him a superpower for free. Valentina de La Fontaine's face was grim. That's it, after all the hard work and over 12,000 deaths, they only gained the ability to float? It's not even as effective as Falcon's backpack, let alone Tony Stark's Iron Man armor. Impossible, absolutely impossible, Valentina panicked for once. If this was all they had achieved, the financiers behind the scenes would surely push her out to appease the military's wrath. Oh, and there are other magic books. There must be more. As if grasping a lifeline, she rushed back to the room she'd been in, hysterically demanding, "Translate all the books for me. My promise remains, but don't test my patience again." American officials were studying the magic books recovered from Kamartaj. Adam Smith, who had stolen several and returned to the sanctuary of the Holy of Holies in New York, had also found a remote town to conduct research. Is this ancient Greek? Adam was, after all, a highly educated Wall Street elite, to drum up business. He'd studied several ancient European civilizations with a touch of pretentiousness. He'd learned some Roman, Greek, and Hebrew, but he wasn't proficient, just a passing acquaintance. Shumagoras, though he struggled to understand, he patiently deciphered each word, finding the same communication ritual within the book. Marvel's magic system is based on the concept of borrowing. Magicians communicate with demons through rituals, borrowing their power and repaying it with interest. A dimensional demon's power depends on the size of its territory. By lending power to its followers throughout the universe and earning interest, it gains power, allowing it to expand its territory and acquire more capital. Doesn't that sound like a capitalist? To make it easier to earn interest on capital, most dimensional demons don't set high entry requirements. Lin Hao deliberately distributed these magic books, allowing them to communicate with demons of all kinds. Regardless of whether you have the aptitude to learn magic, as long as you dare, I'll lend you the money. The summoning ritual requires eyeballs. Adam was unsure about the word, but he pulled out his phone and searched online before finally confirming it. It really is an eyeball. Adam began searching the small town where he was temporarily staying. Eyes from poultry and animals, chickens, ducks, pigs, cows, sheep, and, most importantly, human eyes. Adam's strange behavior caught the attention of a curious butcher, who secretly followed him, eager to see what he was up to. Since Adam was carrying a Han Dynasty sword, the butcher didn't follow him openly. After all, Eastern and Western eunuchs were not uncommon in America today. As more and more civilian eunuchs suddenly gained power and became active, Americans gradually became aware of this special group. Their characteristics were well known: male, with delicate features, a fair, beardless complexion, and carrying a long sword. Recognizing Adam's identity, the butcher became curious about his purchase of such a diverse array of eyeballs, wondering if it involved any supernatural powers. This thought intrigued the ordinary butcher. While he didn't dare follow him openly, Adam, an outsider, was far less familiar with the town than the local butcher. The butcher quickly located Adam's location, a long vacant house. As night fell, Adam lit candles in his room and set a summoning circle using eyeballs and blood. The beholder, Shumagoras, in distant space, sensed the summons and extended its tentacles. "It's Earth," the beholder exclaimed in delight. "Ha ha ha, is the Ancient One dead?" Ordinary summoning circles couldn't open a special channel to welcome the beholder down. They were only enough for him to channel a tiny bit of his power. As the face of Marvel's Cthulhu universe, the beholder possessed a complex array of powers, ranging from physical superstrength and self-healing to mental abilities like contamination, control, and even assimilation. Lin Hao, in order to spread the Evil-Repelling Sword manual, hadn't signed a contract with any of the eunuchs, allowing a wisp of the beholder's consciousness to descend and penetrate Adam's soul. "Huh? Are Earthlings so frivolous these days?" The beholder's consciousness sensed the mutilation of Adam's body. "Still, this Earthling's strength is quite impressive. Strange, why is there another energy within him?" Just as Adam was being controlled by the eye demon's consciousness, the butcher quietly crept to the window and peeked inside, just in time to see the summoning formation Adam had set up and a large eyeball that had appeared on his forehead. The eye demon's corrupting power shot through the eyeball and shot towards the butcher, seeping into his soul almost unimpeded. Another large eyeball also appeared on the butcher's forehead. Excellent, help me expand my following. More followers meant more beacons, and the dimensional demon's chances of locating Earth increased. Unfortunately, the eye demon's power was limited, unable to sustain its activities for much longer. After a moment, its consciousness withdrew into Adam's soul. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelis. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 210, What level of evil cult is it that it is worthy of being on the same level as us? Many cults emerged in America during the 20th century, including David Koresh's Branch Davidians, Bhagavan Sri Rajneesh's Rajneesh Ashram, and the People's Temple, responsible for the tragic suicide of 909 people. These cults share similar characteristics. They first establish a stronghold in a secluded, remote location, then recruit followers to live there. They then use both brutal and gentle methods to exert mental control, forcing them to contribute money, labor, and even their lives. Similar ashrams and monastic orders continue to exist into the 21st century. In northwestern Ohio, not far from New York State, a small sect suddenly emerged in the small town of Geneva, near Lake Erie, devoted to the eye. This isn't the look at me kind of gaze, but rather the eye god whose totem is the eyeball. The sect's leader, a former butcher in a remote town, received divine instructions. Since receiving a divine summons, he has been tirelessly preparing for the ritual, enhancing his power through offerings of blood and various eyeballs. The beholder's power is far too immense for ordinary humans to withstand. Adam Smith summoned the beholder by reciting a spell from a grimoire. Combined with his practice of the sort of exorcism, the power he gained was both stronger and purer. Had he not previously encountered magic and lacked the means to resist spiritual intrusion, Adam might have mastered the beholder's power, like Strange in Doctor Strange, the multiverse of madness, rather than allowing its consciousness to invade his soul. However, the butcher named Jim was denied the privilege of the beholder's personal presence. He only received a small, contaminated remnant of power, which he memorized as a crude summoning ritual. Unlike the rituals recorded in Kamar Taj's grimoires, which could draw upon the beholder's power and provide some resistance to mental contamination, this ritual was simply a pig-slaughtering scheme offered by the beholder. Kamar Taj's sorcerers, guided by the Ancient One's experience, could maintain their integrity even when borrowing the power of dimensional deities. They could even borrow at low interest rates, even like the Ancient One, without repaying. That day, a legitimate worship ceremony was taking place in the auditorium of Geneva's largest hotel. This so-called worship ritual was spontaneously organized and promoted by believers who had been corrupted by the eye demon and thus gained a glimmer of power. Cleveland journalist Walter Crown, receiving information from an informant, traveled from Cleveland specifically to expose the true nature of the eye demon cult. Since the beginning of the new century, the development of the internet has given netizens worldwide more access to information, making the tactics of traditional cults more commonplace. Coupled with the ease of communication, cults are highly vulnerable to crackdowns by the authorities once they become known to the outside world, resulting in a decreasing number of exposed cults. As an older journalist, Walter still remembers the dramatic attack 17 years ago by American authorities, dispatching agents from the FBI and the ATF to storm Carmel House in Waco, Texas. Carmel House was the headquarters of the Branch Davidians, a sect that claimed the end of the world was imminent and urged its followers to stockpile supplies and weapons for self-defense. Embracing the Texas redneck spirit, they profited by selling Uzis, AK-47s, ammunition vests, and other desperate merchandise at gun shows, using some of the proceeds to upgrade the estate. The attack on Carmel Estate lasted a full 51 days, ultimately resulting in the deaths of 4 agents and the injuries of 20 others before the estate was captured, allowing 9 cult members to escape. The 1993 film In the Line of Fire, The Waco Ambush depicts this incident. Walter was well aware of the cult's combat effectiveness and terrifying brainwashing abilities. Given the limited global coverage of cults in recent years, each one made headlines, which is why he rushed to the scene the moment he heard the news. As a journalist, one must not forget their roots. Following the eye demon's teachings, Butcher Jim, in order to rapidly expand the influence of the eye sect, never restricted attendance at any of his worship services. Anyone interested was welcome to observe. Leader Jim guaranteed that once you visited, you'll never want to leave. Because, Wei was tired of chopping wood. So Walter easily slipped into the auditorium without encountering any resistance. Just as he was wondering if this didn't sound like a cult, he suddenly saw a group of people wearing green t-shirts with large eyeballs printed on them carrying baskets of eyeballs onto the stage. Walter method. Walter was stunned. With a touch of trypophobia, he felt nauseous and uncomfortable from the sight of these eyeballs. He looked away, but instead aimed his hidden camera at the stage. On the stage, members of the Eye Gaze cult, under the command of their leader, Jim, used various eyeballs to form a summoning circle. Then, Jim slit his wrist with a knife and carved the runes he had memorized with his own blood. The once obese butcher, due to the bleeding, had shrunk steadily. At 1.75 meters tall, he now weighed less than 200 pounds, a loss of over 50 pounds. The lost weight became his strength. Jim was being a bit cunning. He didn't tell the others that the greatest benefits came from using his own blood to summon the eye. When the last rune was drawn, Jim turned to the congregation and the curious onlookers in the auditorium, offering a scornful sneer. "I know some people smear the eye as a cult," Jim said defiantly, scanning the room. "There are even reporters, police officers, and federal agents among you. Haha, all I'm saying is, what cult is this? How dare they be ranked alongside us?" After a sneer, Jim stood at the center of the circle, clasped his hands, and prayed devoutly. "Great Eye, please descend." A green light, transcending time and space, descended upon the auditorium, enveloping everyone present. A large eye suddenly opened on Jim's forehead. After several baptisms, the once cloudy eye grew brighter. The foreheads of the other congregants bore traces of eye patterns, varying in depth depending on how many people participated in the ritual. As more energy gathered, the eye grew clearer, until it transformed into a single, living, eye. After opening his eyes, Jim regained a touch of the eye demon's power. He swung a fist, smashing the wooden podium in front of him. The sight of flying sawdust stunned Walter, a reporter from Cleveland. Even more astonishing was the fact that Jim's bloodied fist had healed before everyone's eyes, even bleeding. Oh my God, Walter felt his world shaken. Not only did he see the scene, but he even felt his body undergo a miraculous transformation in the green light. As if it were filled with more vitality. The real superpowers allowed the eye-sect to rapidly expand throughout northeastern Ohio, quickly reaching Cleveland, a major city in the state. This was home to the Cleveland Corporation, one of the 10 largest financial groups in the United States. Aldridge Killian, who had established a biotechnology company in Cleveland, attended a meeting of the eye-sect and, upon returning home, sent an invitation to Tony Stark in New York. He felt the time for revenge had come. Chapter 211 The Prelude to a Major Event. This round of the story begins in Bern, Switzerland, in 1999. It was the turn of the century, the eve of the 21st century. Lin Hao, just 19 years old, had been with the SWAR for just over a year. Due to his outstanding performance, he was selected to join the overseas exchange delegation and traveled to Bern for academic exchange. This was a high-tech exchange conference sponsored by UNESCO, aimed at allowing scientists from around the world to showcase their advanced research findings, bridging the past and looking to the future. As the youngest of the scientists, Lin Hao felt like a younger generation brought by his grandfathers to witness the excitement. There were a few other young faces at the conference, including Tony Stark, Lin Hao's target, and Maya Hansen, his prey tonight. Tony, who had just reeked of alcohol and presented his integrated circuits presentation, was now displaying his playboy skills. With his brown sunglasses, a white magician's hat with a gold rim, and his shirt collar loosened, the scent of champagne emanated from him, permeating even from a distance. Young Lin Hao walked to the bar, grabbed a cocktail, and watched the playboy from a distance. "How was my speech?" Tony asked Maya, who was wearing a furry headband. "Honestly, I didn't understand it," Maya replied honestly. "Really?" Tony took Maya's hand and said with a smile, "But I like to hear different opinions, whether good or bad." Maya, who had also been drinking a little, didn't resist being led around by the famous playboy. After all, as a fellow American, she was well aware of the scale of Stark Industries. Handsome men have privileges, not to mention he has money. "Where are we going?" Maya allowed herself to be led around by Tony. Into the city for some fun," Tony said seriously. "Or maybe to your place to see your research results," Okay, you can see mine, Maya said meaningfully, but you absolutely mustn't act rashly. Tony, a seasoned driver, immediately received the driving instructions and smiled knowingly. Lin Hao stood at the bar, his back against it, but he didn't approach the playboy. His target today was another man. The reason he'd gone abroad this time was to claim one of the rewards from Marvel's Starter Village. Putting down his drink and slowly following Tony, Lin Hao spotted his target in front of the elevator. Hey, Tony, a disheveled blonde man, wearing old-fashioned glasses and leaning on a cane, limped over to Tony with an ingratiating smile. Old dreaded Killian, I'm a big fan of yours. As the elevator doors opened, Happy, the bodyguard, stretched his arms to protect his boss, but Killian, accustomed to bending over, ducked his head and slipped inside. When Lin Hao reached the elevator, the doors had already closed. He glanced at his watch. It was still a while before the New Year's Eve, so he took his time and went to the restaurant for another bite. It was almost midnight when he leisurely took the elevator to the top floor of the hotel. Sure enough, he saw Killian shivering in the cold wind. Desperate, Killian slowly walked to the edge of the rooftop, attempting to jump. Then he heard another person's footsteps. Lin Hao handed over the blanket he'd grabbed from the waiter and said with a smile, "You've found a great spot to watch the fireworks." Killian turned and saw a face that looked incredibly young. High school student. It wasn't until he saw the badge on Lin Hao's chest that he was surprised. "You're actually a conference attendee." Taking the blanket, Killian said, "Thank you." Lin Hao's clothes were also thin, but he had been practicing the 6 forms for 4 years, and he was considered quite accomplished, so he wasn't afraid of the cold. "I know you are interested in Maya Hansen's research results. Her research can help you improve your ideas." Killian ignored the idea of suicide and looked at Lin Hao in astonishment. "Who are you? How do you know these things? Is it difficult?" Lin Hao shook his head and smiled. "You and Miss Hansen's papers have been published in the journal of this exchange meeting. Your research results can complement each other. Isn't this something that can be discovered with eyes?" Faced with such arrogant remarks, Killian was speechless for a long time. The organizing committee didn't even let you go on stage. They are really a group of old, mediocre blind people." Although Lin Hao's age made Killian somewhat resentful, at this moment he thought that Lin Hao was as talented as him and felt a little sympathetic. Lin Hao ignored his sympathy and got straight to the point. "I have some funds. While not as large as Stark Industries, it should be enough to buy your patent." Having joined SHIE just over a year ago, Lin Hao didn't yet have the strength to transform into a powerful villain, so he had to use his hard-earned stock market money to buy the patent. Killian was also lucky to have met Lin Hao in his youth. "What?" Killian was incredulous. "You want to buy my patent?" "Yes, but I can only afford $100,000, Lin Hao insisted. He had to buy Maya Hansen's patent the next morning, so he had to keep half the funds. Unfortunately, he couldn't leave the group alone when traveling abroad, and as a young Lin Hao, he didn't have the ability to travel thousands of miles overnight. Otherwise, he would have visited the financial centers of Britain, France, and Germany to put his stock trading skills to good use. Thank you very much." Killian was overjoyed. Lin Hao's appearance not only brought him $100,000, but also made him, who had just been contemplating suicide, realize that he was not useless and that his research had value. This gave him renewed faith to live. Most people who commit suicide are momentarily overcome with despair. As long as someone can help them escape their current state of helplessness, they can usually change their minds. "Then let's go downstairs and sign the contract." Lin Hao easily obtained Killian's signed patent buyout agreement and detailed data and samples of the extraneous virus. After dawn, he knocked on Maya Hansen's door again. Tony Stark had just put on his pants and left. Hearing the knock, Maya quickly dressed and opened the door to see a face that looked incredibly young. High school student, Lin Hao, finally unable to contain himself, rolled his eyes and pointed to the badge on his chest, which he had never removed. "Wow, you were also an attendee," Maya exclaimed. "That's impressive." The room was a mess, with the charred marks of the plant explosion and the smell and residue left by a night of continuous artillery fire. Lin Hao, unwilling to linger, stated his purpose directly. "Ms. Hansen, I'm very interested in your research and would like to purchase your patent license." This, Maya, in addition to her in-depth discussion with Tony last night, had also had another in-depth discussion, receiving a few casual suggestions from the other party. Although Tony, cursed by knowledge, wasn't a biological expert, his understanding of Maya's ideas immediately sparked a new idea. Like a super powerful computer, it can provide a preliminary answer to any question you ask. Don't worry, I'm only conducting personal research, not buying out a company, Lin Hao said quickly. Killian, on the verge of collapse, naturally sought a better deal, but Maya remained confident in her research. After a moment's consideration, Maya nodded and agreed, okay, but we'll have to negotiate the price. Scientific research is expensive, and no one would refuse more funding. This chapter merely touches on the cause. What follows is a major event and a grand occasion. Chapter 212, Profit-seeking is the primary goal of capital. After receiving $100,000 from Lin Hao to purchase the patent, Aldrich Killian contacted Maya Hansen upon returning to America, explaining his research ideas and proposing a collaboration. Maya discovered a remarkable complementarity between their research results, with Killian's approach aligning with several areas Tony Stark had suggested. As a scientist, seeing the potential for further advancement in her research, she couldn't resist such a collaboration. After negotiating the division of patent rights, both parties contributed a portion of the funds to establish a new laboratory. Upon returning to America, Killian finally overcame his initial feelings of denial, realizing he had lost money. He took the contract to a lawyer, who advised him to modify the initial data and re-register the patent for his findings. However, Killian went further, deciding to wait until he and Maya developed a new serum before registering the patent for the new results. Because the samples had reacted chemically, the initial data had been completely distorted. Killian simply revamped the serum, giving it a different name and registering it as a new patent, completely disregarding the licensing agreement he had signed with Lin Hao. Busy arguing with colleagues and collecting Soul's resentment for a raffle, Lin Hao had no time to dwell on these matters. He wanted the extremis virus solely for research, to see if he could perfect it and use it on himself to improve his survival. After all, Lin Hao was weak and insecure at the time, so he naturally used every possible means to strengthen his own foundation. However, as Lin Hao grew stronger, he gradually lost his need for the virus serum. Scientific research is a costly endeavor. The $200,000 Killian and Maya earned from selling the patent quickly ran out, adding to their own limited savings. Fortunately, their combined research yielded the first viable extremis virus, capable of regenerating severed limbs. While there was still a minor issue with the explosiveness, it was enough to attract the attention of a financial sponsor. Unsurprisingly, the U.S. military came calling. The technology to regenerate severed limbs perfectly suited the military's needs, bringing both financial benefits and morale. Preparing for the Iraq War, the U.S. military desperately needed a product that would give soldiers peace of mind. As long as they weren't fatally struck in the vitals, they could heal their wounds with serum upon return. Imagine the enormous boost this would provide. The military then stepped in, injecting funding into Killian and Maya's laboratory, allowing them to freely update their version of the extremis virus. Upon learning of this, the Cleveland Consortium, leveraging its close ties to the military, used both carrots and sticks to persuade the two to relocate their laboratory to their Cleveland headquarters. The Great Lakes region is known as America's traditional center of heavy industry. Founded on the strength of the coal and steel combine, the Cleveland Consortium achieved a dramatic surge in capital during the two world wars, becoming one of America's most powerful operators. Unfortunately, in the new century, traditional industries declined, while finance and information technology industries began to lead the new wave of capital. The Cleveland Consortium's financial capital was weak. Its 5 financial institutions, including the Cleveland Trust Company, were limited in strength, forcing it to rely on Eastern financial institutions, particularly those of the Morgan Consortium, for funding. Coupled with the deindustrialization trend that emerged in the West after the 1960s, traditional heavy industry declined, and the Cleveland conglomerate's influence in America also declined. Many people don't understand why the West would embark on this self-defeating deindustrialization. It's because capital is driven by profit. Once this premise is understood, many strange phenomena in the capitalist world become logically explained. Capital's every action is solely driven by the pursuit of profit. Without profit, who would maintain production lines and pay a bunch of workers for nothing? Without profit, they would rather pour milk into the gutter than give it to the hungry poor. Because after giving it away, no one will buy it. If no one buys, how can they make a profit? Why not lower the price? Any recoupment is a good thing. Hilarious. Do you think poor people still have money? Poor people who have lost their jobs are penniless and not even worth being exploited. Even if the price is lowered, They can't afford it. So they have to dump it and keep the price high so that the middle class who can still afford it will buy it. This is the only way to truly make up for the losses. After the World War, peace arrived, and global demand for steel and weapons plummeted. Heavy industries around the world were forced to shift to civilian uses. Factories that captured market share survived, while those that didn't were forced to go bankrupt. Capitalist governments can't afford to finance entire industrial systems, unlike us, which subsidize many upstream and downstream factories even when they're completely unprofitable. At most, they might secure military orders to keep a few large weapons manufacturers afloat, but they wouldn't subsidize the maintenance of an entire industrial system. This behavior has even been defined as authoritarian tactics that violate free competition. Are capitalists simply foolish or short-sighted? No, it's simply because the state isn't solely owned by a single conglomerate. We've all heard the story of 3 monks with no water to drink. Since the state isn't solely owned by a single conglomerate, why should I be expected to subsidize the maintenance of heavy industry? If the next war breaks out, production lines can be adjusted temporarily. As long as the military places massive orders, countless factories will surely spring up across America. This is the guiding principle of capital. Wasn't this exactly what America did during World Wars II? The elite eagles believed that even if World War II broke out, they would still have time to adjust their production lines and replicate the glory of being the world's factory during World War II. Selfishness led them to cut back on heavy industry when profits declined. Arrogance led them to believe they could continue to dominate the world and hold aloof positions. Consequently, the Cleveland Consortium, centered on heavy industry, saw its influence in the new century fall far short of that of the Rockefeller Consortium, which controlled the oil industry, and the major financial conglomerates, such as Morgan and Citigroup, which had always been in the booming sector. The Cleveland Consortium's leaders couldn't just sit back and watch their influence decline, could they? For decades, they had also been developing emerging industries. But their weak financial resources often left them behind, often outcompeting the Rockefellers, Morgans, and Citigroups. After all, emerging industries require capital, not old, cumbersome heavy industrial production lines. Fortunately, thanks to their years of military connections, they finally gained early access to Killian and Maya's research and decisively took preemptive action. The internet was too expensive, and the Cleveland Consortium couldn't compete with the financial sector. But a lean camel was bigger than a horse, and they weren't broke yet. Any money they could squeeze out was enough to support Killian's lab. Killian and Maya moved their lab to Cleveland. After nearly a decade of research, the stability of the extremis virus gradually improved, but its explosive vulnerability persisted. Because this flaw was so obvious, and with little civilian value beyond military needs, other consortiums gradually lost patience and allowed the Cleveland Consortium to monopolize the extremis virus. Everyone wanted something profitable, not a human bomb. Killian, who had long been plagued by the extremis virus's flaws, finally saw the light at the end of the tunnel. What if the unique abilities of the insect were combined with the extremis virus? Demons and viruses, a powerful alliance. Chapter 213 Tony Stark, I have to go. West of Los Angeles, in Malibu, at his seaside clifftop villa, Tony Stark, busy at home, received an invitation. Since his last death, Tony had reduced his time outdoors, immersing himself in the Iron Man suit, constantly upgrading it. However, he discovered a sad truth. Every time he upgraded his suit, the world changed. Initially, the Mark II encountered the Red Swordsman and the Dongfang Bei, who split the sky with one sword. After finally upgrading several generations, a hammer fell from the sky, destroying the White House. Helpless, after being beaten by the real Steve Rogers, Tony returned to his workshop and continued upgrading his suit. After a period of tiring work and upgrading his suit, a man named Tom Riddle suddenly appeared in England, unveiling a mysterious magical world. Tony then had to consider the suit's magic resistance. He had no idea how to design the magical suit. After all, this was a completely new field, and he didn't even have a research sample. Then, a hellish creature appeared again in Texas. Tony, a pure materialist scientist, had repeatedly wondered if he was cursed with bad luck over the past 2 years. How could that be? He was always targeted. He'd tried his best to catch up, but he'd been beaten to pulp, with no results at all. The once supreme genius had been driven into depression and anxiety. Yes, the genius Tony Stark placed the peace of America, and indeed the world, on his shoulders, yet he couldn't even handle the first invincible East. The world was becoming increasingly dangerous, and America's enemies were growing. How could the proud Tony sleep? He was the genius Tony Stark. Sir, I think you should get some rest. You've been working 72 hours straight, Jarvis reminded him. Einstein only needed 6 hours of sleep a year, Tony retorted. Sir, you've received an invitation. Jarvis had to resort to other means to calm Tony down. It's an invitation from AIM Cleveland. They're inviting you to attend their new product launch. Not interested, I've never heard of it. Tony didn't even look up, still busy at his workbench. A playboy wouldn't even bother to remember a woman he'd had intimate contact with, let alone a slovenly man he'd only met once. It's an emerging biotech company, headquartered in Cleveland. Haha, Tony interrupted Jarvis' introduction with a laugh. A biotech company in an old industrial area. Okay, your joke cracked me up. Don't bother me anymore. I have a lot of work to do. Jarvis quickly added, Sir, this company has had a close partnership with the military for many years, and its majority shareholder is the Cleveland Trust Company. Oh, Tony's interest brightened. Although Stark Industries' assets were expanding since entering the energy sector, he couldn't underestimate the influence of the established conglomerates. After all, he'd paid a considerable portion of his profits to the established conglomerates as a membership fee to gain access to the energy sector. Otherwise, the established conglomerates wouldn't care if he was a genius or not, or how important he was to America. Someone would have already come to his villa with explosives. Okay, tell me about this alphabet company. Tony didn't stop working, just entertaining himself with a story. The company's founders are two biologists, Aldrich Killian and Maya Hansen. Jarvis was just beginning to speak when a car pulled up to the villa entrance and a woman emerged. Scans and comparisons confirmed her identity to be Maya Hansen, one of the founders of AIM. Sir, we have a visitor. One of the founders of this company, Jarvis emphasized. A woman, a beautiful woman, as expected. As the electronic system that knew Tony best, Jarvis was always accurate in judging his host. Tony stood up, glanced at the security camera at the door, and silently put down his tools. You're right, I should take a break. I'll go upstairs and have a cup of coffee to refresh myself. Men, everyone understands. Even if they've already chosen a woman and sworn not to betray her, they can't help but be drawn to a beautiful woman walking down the street. Tony went upstairs. Jarvis had already opened the door for the beautiful woman who had arrived. Maya walked in, curiously examining the villa's interior. Your company's service is so attentive, Tony asked curiously, approaching the bar. An email wasn't enough. The founder actually came to invite us personally. Did you get Killian's email? Maya asked anxiously. What's that? Tony took a sip of his drink. You don't remember? Maya chuckled self-deprecatingly. Why am I not surprised at all? Hearing the familiar tone and looking back at Maya's piercing gaze, Tony was startled. Experienced, he immediately realized he'd probably had an affair with this woman. He quickly reassured her, it's not your fault. I don't even remember what I had for breakfast. I want to talk to you privately, preferably not here. It's urgent. Maya glanced toward the bedroom, as if afraid the hostess would barge in. I shouldn't have refused, but now I have an official girlfriend, Tony said, his voice trembling. Just then, Pepper Potts came down from the upstairs bedroom. Tony, are there any guests? Maya Hansen, a botanist. I used to know her, but not very well. Tony quickly pulled Maya to a secluded spot and whispered, don't tell me there's a 9-year-old kid I've never met waiting for me in a car outside. Wow, you remember the time? Maya teased, then turned serious. Tony, I'm here to tell you not to go to Killian's press conference. Don't. Such a solemn warning clearly indicated she knew something. She had come specifically to warn Tony, with whom she had a fleeting fling, not to go. Unfortunately, her good intentions were in vain. Having only had a single in-depth encounter with Tony, Maya didn't know him well. The proud, even arrogant, Tony Stark would never accept such advice. Instead, her warning would spark a rebellious curiosity about an invitation he had originally held little interest in. It's like those middle school kids who, despite being warned by their parents against premature romance, are driven by their parents nagging to try the forbidden fruit for the first time. Interesting. One of the two founders invited me, while the other warned me not to go. Tony's curiosity and competitive spirit were piqued. I have to go, more to come, and it'll be featured in the editor's recommendations tomorrow. Keep working on it and post 5 more chapters during the recommendation period. Guys, please vote for me. Chapter 214 The Drama of Mandarin. Afghanistan, a mysterious place known as the Graveyard of Empires, has been embroiled in a 20-year war led by the US-led coalition since 9/11. In the spring and summer of 2010, the war was far from over, and the land was still rife with armed personnel from both sides. 2 years earlier, Tony Stark had traveled a long way to sell weapons, but his partner had rigged them, trapping them in the hands of the Ten Rings. Aldrich Killian, deeply concerned about Tony's kidnapping, paid an intelligence agency to investigate the circumstances. Besides Abate, whom Tony had already eliminated, another key figure in the incident came into his sight. This led Killian to learn of the Ten Rings. After further investigation, he discovered that the Ten Rings were an ancient organization with a long history, rumored to be linked to numerous notorious assassinations. 2 years ago, driven by a desire for revenge, Killian considered using a nefarious scheme to gain leverage. He contacted the Ten Rings and proposed a partnership. But Killian had no idea of the true Ten Rings gang. He assumed his wealth would buy their obedience, like mercenaries. The Ten Rings members, however, were only willing to work for a fee and ignored this idiot's attempts to recruit them. Although Su Wenwu had long been absent from the gang, even absent from view, the leaders of each Ten Rings gang were aware of their leader's true power and immortality. These gangs were originally branches of orphans adopted by Su Wenwu, and most have been passed down from generation to generation. Each generation of leaders has deeply etched the leader's power into their memories since childhood, resulting in virtually no betrayals over the past millennium. The only betrayals were the leader's children. Killian, this foolish old man, thought he could recruit them with just a few dollars. He was completely ignorant of his own limitations. Finding it impossible to recruit the Ten Rings gang, Killian considered establishing his own faction, operating under the Ten Rings banner. It's safe to say that ignorance is bliss. Fortunately, in the original story, he died early. By the time Su Wenwu re-emerged, Killian was already dead, and he could only capture the clown impersonating the Mandarin and have him perform a play for his own amusement. Currently, Killian is still alive and has formed a mercenary group under the banner of the Ten Rings. However, the group lacks a core figure, a memorable symbol. After careful selection, Killian found a down-and-out young actor to play the role of the Ten Rings symbol. Trevor, I don't think I need to remind you of how bad things were back then. Killian, dressed in a smart suit, stood before the bald man, surveying his surroundings with disdain. This was a small town in the interior of Afghanistan, the setting for Killian's terrorist propaganda films. Damn my shoes, Killian searched for a clean cloth, trying to wipe the dust off his brand new leather shoes. A bald man named Trevor Slattery quickly knelt down and wiped Killian's shoes with his sleeve, breathing on them with his forehead close to his feet for a few breaths, fearing they might not be clean enough. Killian was delighted with his attitude and smiled, instructing his men, help him decorate the place properly. Make our protagonist's life comfortable, bring some women, and don't forget his favorite drug. Trevor was a washed-up, drug-addicted actor whose career had fizzled out. But Killian was drawn to him for his unique temperament. A makeup artist arrived and glued a small braid onto Trevor's head, tucking it into a pile like a pile of shit. To hide his large eyes, so Western audiences would automatically imagine them as squinty, he was given black sunglasses. He was then dressed in a trench coat he considered to have Eastern influences, imitating the Fu Manchu figure the Western world had always believed existed, creating a new image of the Mandarin. Fu Manchu is one of British author Sax Rohmer's most famous characters, first appearing in The Mystery of Dr. Fu Manchu in 1913. He is widely considered the personification of the Western world's Yellow Peril theory. Dressed in Qing Dynasty eunuch attire, his tall, bald head, thin eyebrows, long eyes, and sinister features perfectly embodied the Western world's fear and prejudice against the mysterious East. Killian sought to capitalize on this fear by launching his Mandarin. The promotional video includes both interior and exterior footage shot in a small Middle Eastern town. It depicts lines of people being killed, explosions and smoke, and the cries of women and children. Some say I'm a terrorist, but I'm more like a teacher, Trevor says in a stilted voice, showcasing his dialogue skills honed through years of acting. America, are you ready for a lesson? In 1864, at Sand Creek, Colorado, the U.S. military waited for the peaceful Cheyenne warriors to go hunting, then attacked and massacred the families they left behind. Then, they occupied their land. 39 hours ago, the U.S. Air Force Base at Ariosalem was attacked. Yes, that's right, I did it. The soldiers were out training, and the warriors were away. Cool. After the shot ended, Trevor couldn't wait to praise the amateur filming crew around him. That's a cool line. Then, turning around, he saw the mercenaries who had fired the shots were carrying bodies, and he couldn't help but praise them. Amazing. They're so dedicated. The scene was over, and they still didn't stand up. Such dedicated extras deserve a chicken drumstick in their lunchboxes. Thinking back to his own laziness back then, Trevor felt a pang of shame. If he had been as dedicated, he might have made it to Hollywood. Trevor thought they were all filming a scene, but he didn't realize that Killian's mercenaries were using real guns and ammunition, and the extras he thought were all dead. As producer and investor, Killian, nestled in the comfort of his air-conditioned car, nodded in satisfaction after viewing the finished film. Edited and give me the master. If 2 years ago, Killian's attempt to find the 10 rings was simply a desire for revenge against Tony Stark for the humiliation he suffered 10 years prior, now he harbors far greater ambitions. These ambitions stem from the increasingly stable extremis virus, the many wounded American soldiers he has brought under his control, the vice president he has rallied to his cause, and the newly acquired power of his gaze. As the saying goes, a weapon in hand breeds murder. Killian is no longer content with being a mere researcher. He craves something more: power and wealth. Mandarin is one of the tools he uses to achieve his plans. Little does he know, the fake could very well meet the real deal, and Ken Xiaofu is likely to be slapped in the face by Master Kong. Chapter 215. Before the big event. After receiving the promotional video, Killian didn't release it immediately. His plan wasn't complete yet, lacking several crucial pieces. The so-called new product launch, hyped up in advance by AIM in Cleveland, finally arrived. Reporters from across the United States and even the world arrived, bearing generous red envelopes. With the exception of one country where reporters received a stern warning from their superiors and didn't attend, major media outlets from other countries showed some respect. Upon arriving at the event, the reporters were met with a strange sight. Eyeballs everywhere. A group of people wearing green t-shirts with a gigantic eye printed on both sides. They thought they were volunteers, but they entered and sat down with impunity. No one was talking to each other, everyone's face was filled with reverence. Entering the event hall, they saw a gigantic plastic eye hanging upside down from the ceiling, covering the entire venue, as if gazing down at every guest. What the hell? Wondered a reporter from the BBC in England. Did the information say this company was a biotech company? He'd already written the outline for the press release, waiting only to take a few photos on site and then refine a couple of key points to fill it in, at least to justify the generous offer. Now all this was just adding to his workload. Could their products be related to ophthalmology? A reporter from the German Broadcasting Corporation, ARD, speculated nearby. Walter Krohn, a reporter for a local Cleveland TV station, was already a devout believer in the eye sect. After all, people are realistic. Adhering to other sects only offers illusory psychological satisfaction, devoid of any real benefit. But believing in the great eyes offers immense power and vitality, so why not? And what about God? God is nothing. And what about the Marvel Universe's God? Hearing the gossip of these blasphemers, Walter, wearing a green t-shirt, wanted to rush over and beat them up. But he faithfully adhered to the rules set by Master Jim, never forcing anyone to believe, nor excluding non-believers. Everything was left to chance. See, this is the demeanor of a sect truly endowed with divine power. We are free to come and go, with no coercion. Believe it or not. Isn't this more divine than Catholicism, Eastern Orthodoxy, or Christianity? Walter walked past the reporters and headed straight for the stage. His religious identity afforded him the best photo op. Outside the venue, Maya Hansen, dressed in an evening gown, stood at the host's table to greet the arriving guests. She spotted Tony Stark immediately. Tony, undeterred by his flamboyant demeanor, arrived in a sleek sports car. As he stepped onto the red carpet, an unmanned steel armor descended from the sky and landed behind him like a loyal guard. It's Tony Stark, what a surprise. He's actually here for this press conference? In the past year, FHM couldn't even find any gossip about Playboy. Is he in trouble? Reporters gathered around to interview him, while the onlookers in the background indulged in gossip about Tony's latest, only to discover that last was 2 years ago. Maya sighed as she stepped forward. You're here after all, shouldn't I be here? Tony greeted everyone enthusiastically, then asked with a hint of pride, didn't you send me an invitation? He wore a sharing device on his head that allowed him to share his Iron Man suit's vision. and microsensors implanted in his arms allowed him to remotely control the suit. This was Tony's confidence. No matter what was going on at this press conference, he was confident he could handle it with his Iron Man suit. At the same time, displaying the suit openly was also a warning to those with ulterior motives to behave themselves. Unfortunately, Killian was only delighted by his arrival. "Wow, look who's here," Killian, dressed in a suit and tie, approached with a boastful, exaggerated tone. Tony Stark, Tony, who had already asked Jarvis to look up Killian's information beforehand, looked him up and down and chuckled maliciously. "Interesting, you can actually walk." Killian's fake smile vanished instantly. This was a painful memory, and Tony's attitude only reminded him of the humiliation of 10 years ago. He took 2 steps forward, pointed at Tony's chest, and unabashedly exasperatedly said, "I heard you had a puncture. Our new product can heal it, if you just get down on your knees and beg me." Honestly, Tony hadn't expected such a heated exchange from the moment they met. He couldn't remember doing anything truly awful. It was just a stand-up, so what? He had no idea how much pain Killian had suffered 10 years ago, how much it had nearly driven him to suicide. As the saying goes, a man's breakdown often happens in an instant. It's not that men have less resilience, it's just that men tend to hold back, to convince themselves to conceal their emotions. However, if these negative emotions aren't vented, they'll inevitably erupt under a trigger. Suicide or murder. "I didn't expect your tone to become so much harder after you left the crutches." Who was Tony to indulge him? "But I still think the crutches are better for you. Do you want me to help you find your former self?" Seeing the 2 men about to fight, Maya quickly spoke up. "Killian, the press conference is about to begin." Killian suddenly laughed. "If you're brave, come on in and take a look." Men often understand men better, and Killian knew his provocation would only make Tony more determined to enter the venue. Sure enough, Tony, without a word, strode into the venue, followed by his Iron Man suit. The layout of the venue made Tony frown slightly. For some reason, the giant eyeballs hanging upside down from the dome gave him a sense of unease. Jarvis, search for all beliefs, myths, and legends related to the eyeball. Tony was clever. Although he didn't know about the existence of the eye sect, he immediately realized it was likely a mysterious ritual. Upon receiving the order, Jarvis immediately found a lot of information for Tony, the most striking of which was the eye sect that had suddenly emerged in Northwest Ohio. "Sir, you guessed correctly. They are indeed a mysterious sect." Jarvis showed Tony a video showing Jim performing the summons. In the video, the eye sect's followers were dressed identically to some of the people in the front row. He could even see leader Jim sitting in the front row, chatting enthusiastically with Killian. "Sir, it seems that followers of this sect can gain certain superpowers through rituals." Jarvis zoomed in on the video for Tony. "So that's why he asked me to come." Tony looked puzzled. "To give me superpowers?" The world had become chaotic. Superpowers were no longer urban legends, and British magic schools were openly teaching superpowers to ordinary people. So the theory that superpowers were acquired through some kind of ritual sacrifice couldn't shake Tony's worldview. After all, it had already been reshaped by the appearance of Dongfang Bubei. But he couldn't understand Killian's intentions. He looked like he wanted to kill him, so why would he be so kind as to offer him a gift? Chapter 216 Biology no longer exists. When the guests arrived, host Killian took the stage with a warm smile. "Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for coming to AIM's new product launch." After a flurry of clichés, Killian got straight to the point. "Maybe many of you don't know what our company does, so let me introduce it to you today." A large screen appeared behind him, showing a soldier who had lost both legs. Luca James, a brave soldier, was struck by enemy shrapnel while trying to save a comrade on the battlefield, instantly losing both legs. American public opinion does not favor killing the enemy. Every war draws anti-war protests and marches, and they even more highly value saving lives on the battlefield. Killian seized on this point, successfully eliciting the curiosity of the reporters present. This brave soldier shouldn't have to spend the rest of his life confined to a wheelchair, so we at AIM will give him a whole new life. In the video, several men in white coats strapped James to an operating table, one of them injecting him with a vial of serum. A moment later, James's subcutaneous tissue began to glow red, and he screamed in pain. Over Cleveland, a plane remained invisible. Lin Hao and Wanda waited inside. Bored and watching TV, Wanda curiously asked Lin Hao, "Is this also the extremis virus?" "It's an incomplete version. I updated it 9 years ago," Lin Hao replied casually. Brother Lin, you're awesome. Wanda's eyes sparkled. Lin Hao smiled and rubbed her head. He had brought Wanda to guard the venue because he suspected Killian would stage a massive ritual. If he did lure the eye demon over, he could defeat it and then take it as a pet, keeping the situation under control. After all, the eye demon's contamination ability didn't discriminate between friend and foe, so it was safer to keep it under control. Down below, on the large screen, footage continued to play. After being injected with the extremis virus, the severed legs began to extend outward like flowing magma. Beneath the crimson skin, bones and blood vessels could be faintly seen growing. Less than 2 minutes later, the red glow faded, and the soldier who had lost his legs had miraculously regrown them. A sudden silence fell over the crowd. Even the believers who had witnessed a miracle of eye contact were stunned by the incredible sight, not to mention everyone else. Oh my god. Is this real? Oh my god, he actually, incredible. How can severed legs grow back? Is this magic? A year ago, no one would have suspected magic. The world was different now. No, it's not magic. Killian on the stage quickly wiggled his finger, emphasizing, it's the power of science. Tony Stark, in the audience, immediately turned to Maya Hansen beside him and asked with a hint of surprise, did your research back then work? It had nothing to do with picking up girls. Memories related to science were something Tony could hold on to for a long time. 10 years ago, in the hotel, even though he was drunk, Tony still remembered seeing Maya's research and being amazed by it. Tony was, after all, a wealthy capitalist. Even though Killian acted like he was sworn enemies at the door, he still had to maintain the basic etiquette of upper-class society. Failure to show Tony proper respect would be tantamount to flouting the rules of American high society, destined for failure. Therefore, Killian had to see Tony in the front row. It was a spot he had chosen specifically for him. Maya remained silent when questioned, unsure how to respond, knowing the serum still had significant flaws. Finally, she managed only one sentence, keep watching. Killian, on stage, waved for the hostess to bring up several elegant trays containing alloy boxes. The boxes opened to reveal a tube of serum. This is our company's flagship product, a world-class cell regeneration technology that can not only regenerate severed limbs but also heal a wide range of injuries. I've named it Hope Serum, and it will bring new hope to everyone with disabilities. There was another moment of silence, followed by a burst of applause. They were unaware of the serum's flaws. They simply saw humanity's triumph over illness and disease, achieving another significant advancement in medical technology. The miraculous sight of a severed limb regenerating was worth their applause. Do you think that's all there is to today? Killian thoroughly enjoyed the attention and admiration. It brought him immense satisfaction. The more one lacks something, the more one craves it. He had once been an unknown, even to the point of contemplating suicide by jumping off a building, but now he could enjoy the flowers and applause. This was life at its best. What was a man like Tony Stark, born with everything, to be compared to? Killian pressed a button on the podium, and a summoning array slowly rose. The rapturous applause suddenly paused as a dense mass of eyeballs of all shapes and sizes appeared. Just now, everyone was celebrating another great advancement in human technology. How could so many disgusting eyeballs suddenly appear? It was like suddenly finding a pile of shit while enjoying a feast. Those who had never seen it began to whisper, but the ice cultists in the front row became even more devout, clasping their hands in silent prayer. They didn't know what to pray for, and even the ritual was a haphazard creation of Jim, the leader. Seeing the summoning circle, Jim, sitting in the front row, naturally stood up, but was held down by several soldiers infected with the extremis virus. You? Killian on the stage smiled at him and shook a finger. Jim then remembered something Killian had said to him earlier. Let me summon the eye this time, and you'll give the leader 1 million afterward. Jim hadn't paid it any mind, believing he was the chosen one to walk the earth. Who had anyone else to summon in his stead? Fine, I'll see you make a fool of yourself, Jim said, sitting back down in anger. Killian on the stage sneered, idiot, do you think I know your background? A mere butcher, you dare say you're the leader of a cult? After his previous observations, Killian had keenly realized that the person who performed the summoning would gain the most benefits. Furthermore, the number of sacrifices used and the size of the crowd also affected the power gained. That was why Killian had deliberately created such a grand spectacle, even broadcasting it live. After all this preparation, could a mere butcher snatch away the fruits of his labor? Unlike the foolish Jim who always slit his wrists and squeezed out the blood on the spot, Killian had already stored a sufficient supply of blood, preserving it in the refrigerator. Now, he simply used it to carve the runes he had memorized. As the last rune was carved, a thick green light descended across space and time, and the giant eye hanging upside down from the dome seemed to come alive. Nearly everyone in the audience felt the beholder's gaze, receiving a tiny ray of its power and becoming mesmerized. Killian, on the stage, benefited the most. A large, flexible eye suddenly appeared on his forehead. Feeling the changes in his body, Killian was overjoyed. The beholder's healing ability compensated for the extraneous virus's flaws. It didn't stop it from exploding, but rather greatly enhanced its original healing abilities. Furthermore, Killian discovered that he could channel all his body heat into the eye on his forehead. With a thud, heat surged up, and the large eyeball on his forehead actually shot out a red ray. The ray, as high as 3,000 degrees Celsius, directly evaporated part of the dome, and the upside-down large eyeball tilted down. Tony hurriedly put on the iron armor. He was the only one who did not fall into the addictive experience brought by the power of the eye demon. Shit, what the hell? The ray lasted for a moment, and Killian's head seemed unable to withstand the powerful energy output and exploded violently. But it grew back in the blink of an eye. Tony rushed to Maya and heard her mumbling in a daze, "Biology, it doesn't exist." If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelis. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 217, The Horrifying Eye Demon? It's clearly the best ingredient. Crimson rays reaching 3,000 degrees Celsius raged through the press conference, leaving the venue in ruins. Yet, the guests were still immersed in the momentary trance brought on by the eye demon's power. Ignoring Maya Hansen's whispers, Tony Stark scooped her up and rushed out. After all, she was a woman he'd had a brief fling with, and she'd even come to his house a few days ago to remind him. Tony wouldn't mind rescuing her if he could. That was, provided Pepper wasn't around and wasn't in danger at the same time. "Sir, you've been targeted," Jarvis quickly warned, taking the initiative to activate the Iron Man suit's energy shield. In the background, Aldrich Killian trained his large eye on the outward-moving Iron Man suit. The crimson rays collided with a blue energy shield, the immense force only accelerating the suit's flight out of the venue. The world was changing so rapidly that Tony realized his existing physical defenses were no longer adequate in this ever-changing world, forcing him to activate his energy shield skill. 33% energy loss, sir. I suggest you evacuate immediately. The opponent's ultimate was too powerful. 2 more hits and he'd be completely defeated. While every shot would hit his head, he recovered quickly. It happens again, Tony felt annoyed. In this universe, every time he appeared in Iron Man armor, he was hammered and beaten to death. He just didn't get a chance to show off. During the battle below, in a stealth plane hovering high in the sky, Lin Hao asked Wanda beside him, "Have you found the location of the Beholder?" Lin Hao couldn't master Marvel Universe magic and couldn't follow the power of the dimensional demon. Fortunately, Wanda had a high magical aptitude and had mastered most of Kamartaj's magic over the years. Wanda began to draw circles along the location she sensed. A golden red portal opened, and Lin Hao stepped through. It was a space shrouded in dark green, filled with endless green water, rolling waves. Lin Hao instantly transformed into a Super Saiyan, his entire body enveloped in a golden aura. Although he hadn't learned the art of air dance, he had already mastered the ability to float and move through the air, using his chi to envelope himself. He wasn't sure how much of a difference this was from the traditional air dance, but it worked. Wanda, standing on a golden shield of light, continued searching the space for the eye demon. Down there, it's huge. Lin Hao immediately unleashed a dragon-shaped Kigan wave into the waters below. An octopus tentacle, over 100 meters in diameter, broke through the surface, about to strike the uninvited visitor, only to be struck by an illusory golden dragon. In mid-air, Lin Hao and Wanda quickly distanced themselves, avoiding the violent explosion. Despite its size, the eye demon's tentacle was clearly no match for the Kigan wave launched from its Super Saiyan state, easily shattering it. Thick green blood gushed out, emitting a pungent, fishy odor. The waters suddenly boiled, waves surged into the sky, and a massive creature emerged from the waters. A massive eyeball, over a kilometer in diameter, swirled, quickly locking onto the two tiny figures in the air. Earthling, though a monster, the beholder's cosmic awareness gave it fluent English. It's truly enormous. Lin Hao, from the air, gazed down at the behemoth in the waters below. The exposed eyeball alone measured over a kilometer in diameter, and each tentacle was at least 10,000 meters long. The dense, wriggling tentacles resembled giant pythons, stirring up trouble in the waters. The beholder is one of the most powerful dimensional demons in the Marvel Universe, possessing tens of thousands of dimensions. 3 billion years ago, during the extinction of the old gods, it visited Earth and briefly ruled it. He was a major rival of the Sorcerer Supreme, even more powerful than Dormammu. He once forced the Ancient One to sacrifice himself to seal him in his own flesh, only to be destroyed by Strange. In the film universe, one of the Beholder's projections appeared in Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness, destroying several buses in what was arguably its worst debut. The Beholder's true form before Lin Hao was many times larger than its miniature counterpart, which couldn't even cover a single street. The aura of Kamartaj, is the Ancient One dead? Although Lin Hao struck him as more dangerous, the Beholder turned his gaze to Wanda first. Kid, have you inherited the Ancient One's position? As a sworn enemy, the Beholder was deeply concerned about the strength of the new generation of Sorcerer Supreme. What's the Ancient One? Is she worthy of my succession? Wanda's face lit up with pride. Having already understood the true nature of Marvel Universe magic, she preferred the magic of the Harry Potter universe, for it was a power entirely her own, without borrowing from others. Greetings over, Lin Hao dove forward. His fist, enveloped in a golden aura, smashed into the Beholder's body, creating a massive bloody hole. The Beholder's abilities didn't include powerful defense, though that was relative. Few in the Marvel Universe can withstand a Super Saiyan's punch. However, the Beholder possessed a powerful self-healing ability, perhaps a common ability shared by all tentacle monsters. Fuck, feeling the intense pain, the Beholder swung its massive tentacles at Lin Hao. Lin Hao raised his palms, easily blocking the massive tentacle. Average, very average, Lin Hao shook his head, looking at the eye demon with disdain. Haven't you eaten yet? Push harder, the eye demon's defenses were broken. Having lived for billions of years, when had it ever suffered such an injustice? Countless tentacles leaped from the water, abandoning their sweeping blows, attempting to transmit immense force through their tips to the damned little creature. Lin Hao, however, handled them with ease. His hands flew, creating afterimages, blocking the eye demon's attacks one by one, hovering in the air without even retreating an inch. After a period of fruitless effort, the eye demon began to panic. Such a powerful foe felt even more dangerous to him than when he had first entered Satorak's Crimson Hell. So, the eye demon activated his most powerful ability, the Cthulhu-inspired mind contamination power. Its massive eye fixed on Lin Hao, and it fired a nearly tangible green beam, striking the tiny creature directly in midair. Lin Hao didn't dodge. He wanted to see if the eye demon, the so-called representative of Marvel's Cthulhu universe, could shake his soul, a soul that didn't belong to the Marvel Universe. Of course, to be on the safe side, he'd separated his spirit form beforehand to allow Odin to recharge it, replenishing his powerful spiritual pressure. Bathed in green light, Lin Hao showed no reaction. He even attempted to separate his spirit from his body, facing the Beholder's beam directly with his spirit form. Still no reaction. That's it, the great Demon King felt a pang of resentment. After preparing for so long, he couldn't even provoke him. After emitting a continuous stream of green beams for several minutes, the Beholder seemed to tire slightly. But seeing the tiny creature's lack of reaction, he panicked. How is that possible? Even the Ancient One wouldn't dare face this. Never mind, this is so disappointing. Lin Hao shook his head and grumbled, so frustrating. He then teleported forward, grasped the Beholder's massive head with one hand, and lifted it up. Despite its struggles and resistance, Lin Hao easily cut him off. Lin Hao's hand severed each thick tentacle, dropping it into the water below, like a hot pot restaurant employee slicing up an octopus alive. In one word, delicious. The little devil appeared, wielding a small fork and scratching the eye demon's large eye. Green blood flowed out, and the parchment immediately snapped against the eye. The contract was completed, and the eye demon fell into the hands of the great demon. The eye demon blurted out the classic line, "I'm voluntarily now, stop talking. Pick up all the tentacles. I want to eat hot pot." Lin Hao slapped the best ingredients into the water. Chapter 218, America, a land of chaos and chaos. is about to be released. After receiving the power granted by the eye, Killian's healing and attack power increased dramatically, though his speed remained unchanged. By the time he rushed out of the venue, Tony Stark had already driven off in his Iron Man suit. Looks like I need more mobility. He felt a pity for not being able to take out Tony, but Killian had used this ritual summoning to overcome the shortcomings of the extremis virus, gaining powerful ranged attack power and transforming the guests into potential allies. This further bolstered his ambitions. Returning to the scene, Killian first approached Butcher Jim in the front row. Jim, the leader who had undergone numerous ritual summonings, had already awakened. He stared at Killian in disbelief. How can you summon divine power? Why is the power you summon so potent? Impossible, absolutely impossible. I am the one recognized by Lord I. A crimson arm, like magma, reached out. The intense heat instantly reduced Jim, now only a little over 150 pounds, to charcoal, then continued to shatter into chunks of bone that fell to the ground. Killian didn't even glance at it. Is a mere crude butcher worthy of being the pope of a cult? The fascinated guests gradually awoke. After experiencing the power of gaze firsthand, these unbelievers were instantly transformed into devout believers, each one gazing intently at Killian on the stage. Killian surveyed the audience with a satisfied smile. Most of the guests present today were Cleveland's elite, with close ties to the Cleveland conglomerate, some even directly descended from several of the conglomerate's major families. While not patriarchs or leaders, they were still a formidable political force. This was one of the key reasons he had specifically planned this press conference. If his plan succeeded, Killian would need these individuals to support him and solidify the new American order he was creating. Go, tell your friends and family that there's an even grander ceremony waiting for us soon. Cults are inherently inflammatory, let alone one that truly grants its followers divine power. Those who benefited from this ritual summoning were eager to hold the next one as soon as possible. When they learned that the more participants, the greater the benefits, they all became tap water, offering free promotional assistance to eyes. Hopefully, Killian's support group will only grow larger and more sophisticated. Having conquered the ritual and gained power, Killian, emboldened, began to execute his next plan. He hijacked the signal of the National Broadcast Network and broadcast a video recorded by the Mandarin. President Ellis, you've always refused to accept my teachings, but now you can only listen. You know who I am, but you don't know where I am, and you don't know when I will arrive. The stereotypical Eastern villain appeared on television screens across the United States, shocking Americans. It seems our signal is back. I can't believe the American Broadcasting Network has been hacked. The entire nation is on high alert. According to reliable information received by this station, all searches for the Mandarin have so far failed. No one knows where the Mandarin is. Atop a high mountain in Indochina, on the leeward side of a ridge, stands a magnificent castle. Surrounded by Western-style walls, the interior houses are designed in the style of an Eastern courtyard house. The Ten Rings gang's leader, Su Wenwu, who the gang members believed had disappeared, had actually been within this base the entire time. He was simply distraught and uninterested in government affairs, and hadn't contacted the leaders of the various gangs. He didn't care if his men harbored ulterior motives, he simply eliminated them and replaced them with a new batch of obedient dogs. The passage of time had caused Su Wenwu to lose interest in many things. He had once been deeply interested in Taro Village, but after meeting his wife, Yingli, his interest in her overshadowed that of the village itself. For years, Su Wenwu had been searching the world for a way to resurrect his wife, having mastered mystical powers that granted him immortality. As someone who possessed immortality, Su Wenwu firmly believed a method for resurrection existed. His obsession with his wife even triggered the soul-sucking beast sealed deep within Taro Village, which constantly mimicked his wife's voice to lure him to Taro Village and break the seal. Currently, the soul-sucking beast's power wasn't strong enough, and Su Wenwu's paranoia wasn't strong enough to warrant an immediate departure. Bored, he was alerted by his men inside the base. A trusted confidant, his face painted with peaking opera makeup, came running to report, "Boss, a man calling himself Mandarin has appeared outside, stirring up trouble under the banner of our Ten Rings gang." An image of Mandarin warning America flashed across the screen. Su Wenwu froze for a moment, then laughed. "Have I been gone too long? How dare some random person show up? Boss, I'll take care of this guy for you." The confidant declared his loyalty. "Find him, bring him back, and execute him." Su Wenwu waved his hand, unconcerned. It wasn't until the Mandarin's agitation intensified, with multiple bombings occurring across America, that Su Wenwu finally felt intrigued and set off for America as a pastime. Valentina de Lafontaine had been under immense pressure lately. She was already busy digesting her magical spoils, constantly on guard against retaliation from the remaining mages of Kamartaj, and now the Mandarin had appeared. Her financial backers showed no understanding and simply pushed the task down her path. Those who failed to complete it would be abandoned. Continue to summon the gods. America must wield greater power. Valentina's philosophy was quintessentially American. As long as the weapon at hand was powerful enough, any demon could be dealt with. Besides the serpent god set, the magic book Valentina had obtained could summon several other dimensional demons, and her subordinates had already acquired a variety of supernatural powers. However, these people, unlike the magicians of Kamartaj, lack the guidance of their predecessors. They don't know how to dispel the mental contamination of the dimensional demons, and inevitably suffer from various mental problems. Valentina has been forced to label them expendable. She, too, desires the perfect psychic, but America's fate has been fraught in the past 2 years, and all she's received are defective and faulty products. First there was the Evil-Repelling Sword technique, then there are dark magic books. The American authorities are currently unaware that, in addition to the dimensional demons Valentina is currently summoning and the demon summoning rituals passed down through Adam Smith, several eunuchs who participated in the attack on Kamartaj have survived. They have recently returned to America from around the world, bringing with them the magic books and demon summoning rituals they looted. Soon, America, rife with demons, will be revealed. A typhoon passed through, and I was stuck in traffic on my way home from get off work. Tomorrow is the weekend, and I'll continue writing through the night. I should be able to finish 2 chapters before the deadline, and I'll post them in the early morning, so you can read them tomorrow morning. Chapter 219 Iron Man and the Original Captain in Action. Malibu, a clifftop villa. Tony Stark returned, carrying Maya Hansen. Pepper, come and help. Maya had actually woken up, but a clear crack had appeared on her forehead. Though her eyes hadn't opened yet, an eyeball-like object could already be seen wriggling beneath her skin. Wow, you actually brought this old acquaintance home. Pepper Potts gave Tony a deathly glare, a forced smile. Do you need me to make room? I've been working tirelessly for your company for the past 2 years, finally transforming it from a weapons manufacturer into an energy supplier, increasing its market value and making it prosper. Instead of expressing gratitude, you're bringing home this wild woman right in front of me. You need my help? What for? Just a couple of pushes from behind? Tony, a skilled pickup artist, naturally picked up on his girlfriend's tantrum and quickly pointed at Maya's forehead, saying, she's in trouble. Pepper's greatest strength was her understanding of the situation. Seeing the real issue, she immediately dropped her temper and hurried over to examine Maya's forehead. Hey, could you give me a mirror so I can look at myself? Maya, shivering as she regained consciousness, added, a cup of hot cocoa and a blanket would be perfect. She had just been carried in the Iron Man suit all the way from Cleveland in the eastern Midwest to Marbury on the western coast, a distance of over 3,800 kilometers. If it weren't for the added power of the beholder, she would have frozen unconscious. Pepper glared at Tony, thinking, with your temper, who else would want you but me? She went to get a hot drink and a blanket, and Tony emerged from the Iron Man suit. Jarvis, scan her. A blue beam of light shot down from the ceiling, sweeping Maya from head to toe, projecting a humanoid figure before Tony. Sir, there's a strong energy fluctuation on Ms. Hansen's forehead. Jarvis didn't need to remind them. Tony and Maya had already noticed the prominent red mark on the figure's forehead, like a high-temperature warning. Maya quickly walked to the floor-length mirror, examining the eye that seemed poised to open at any moment, even reaching out to poke it. Hiss! A sharp gasp of pain washed over Maya. It's over. This eyeball has connected to my nerves. As a biologist, Maya had a clearer understanding of the changes in her body, but this unscientific phenomenon challenged her worldview. A hole in the skull, with a brain squeezed out, doesn't make sense. Standing before the figure, Tony was already considering surgical removal. Simulate the removal surgery and calculate the success rate. Jarvis immediately projected another screen in front of Tony and quickly replied, Sir, Miss Hansen's third eye is already connected to multiple brain nerves. Forcible removal has a success rate of less than 3%. Furthermore, the eye contains a strange energy. Removal would likely cause an explosion. Maya paused for a moment, no longer dwelling on her own problems. Instead, she immediately reminded Tony, Killian specifically invited many celebrities to prepare for this press conference. They may have also gained superpowers like me. Why did he do this? What does he intend to do with the support of these celebrities? Tony, I think you must understand this. Killian's hatred for you has never subsided in the past 10 years. Faced with this reminder, Tony's first thought was to upgrade the suit. Jarvis. Replace the suit's superpowered energy source. Killian's heat ray had just destroyed a third of the suit's energy source. If he didn't upgrade, he would be defeated in a matter of seconds if he encountered him again. After accepting the reality of an extra eye, Maya began to wonder if she, too, could acquire Killian's powers. She even considered injecting herself with the imperfect extremis virus to replicate Killian's success. Curiosity is human nature, and scientists are even more incurable. Pepper returned, handing Maya a hot drink and a blanket, and saw Tony once again busy at the virtual console. Don't mind him, he's just like that. Once he gets an idea, he forgets everything else, Pepper said, somewhat boastfully, as if asserting her sovereignty. Maya didn't dwell on it, merely glancing at Tony's smooth forehead and exclaiming in surprise, "Strange, how come you're not affected?" Tony, caught up in his work, didn't hear her. Instead, Pepper was quicker to react. "Were you in the same place just now? Did the eye just appear?" Recalling that Maya had visited a few days earlier, and indeed the extra eye wasn't there, Pepper immediately rushed to Tony, grasping his head with both hands and peering closely. "Luckily, fortunately, you didn't grow an extra eye." Hearing his girlfriend say this, Tony finally realized, yet, why wasn't I affected? Despite his usual boastful attitude, believing himself to be the greatest genius in the universe, Tony didn't believe his anatomy was any different from that of ordinary people. "Jarvis, bring up the footage from the scene just now and carefully examine their foreheads, sir." After Killian performed a mysterious ritual, a mark appeared on the foreheads of all the guests, some deep, some shallow. "You were the only one who didn't, so..." Tony's first thought wasn't relief, but joy. "I won't be afraid of the mysterious powers he summons in the future." "Tony, are you taking risks again?" Pepper shouted, annoyed. Sir, there's breaking news." Jarvis quickly played the footage. It was the video of the Mandarin that Killian had broadcast after hijacking the broadcast network. Oh my god, Pepper was in disbelief. This so-called Mandarin could actually hijack the entire American broadcast network. As the current head of Stark Industries, she possessed the same lack of access to information as the average person and understood the difficulty of this undertaking. "Look, I have to go. America needs me," Tony said, turning back to designing an upgrade for his suit. Iron Man, once again slapped in the face, needed to upgrade first. He had a strong premonition of a major battle looming. As all sides prepared for battle, the long-unseen Steve Rogers reappeared in a desert town in western Arizona. It was a mining town, thriving on its mineral resources. Steve was accompanied by Ghost Rider Johnny Blaze and several American eunuchs, swords slung from their waists. Sadako's videotapes roamed the American landscape constantly. Sadako, a true 007 hard worker, meticulously carried out the Great Demon's orders without complaint, contributing to America's cutting-edge cause. Naturally, there were also civilians in Texas. After hearing about the shady dealings of the federal government and Texas authorities, as well as Steve's heroic deeds, they were drawn to his charisma, no chicken talk, and joined the Lone Star Republic in Hell. After defeating Mephisto, Steve inherited the throne of Hell's Lord, gaining not only a significant increase in strength but also the ability to break contracts with evil spirits. However, Johnny chose not to break the contract. For the future of the Lone Star Republic, to achieve true freedom in America, he needed strength. Chapter 220 Hogwarts Semester Tasks. Just as Steve Rogers arrived in the Arizona desert town, far away in England, at Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry, Headmaster Tom Riddle summoned the 3 best students of his house this semester to his office. Principal Riddle, Peter Parker, Gwen Stacy, and Ned Leeds stood respectfully before the great headmaster. "First of all, congratulations on your individual scores placing you in the top 3 of your house this semester," Tom applauded politely. "But before the end of this semester, you can choose to complete a semester-long mission to win the final House Cup prize." "A semester-long mission?" Peter exclaimed in surprise. "Can we still go on missions?" The lively and active Peter had been cooped up in school for an entire semester, nearly 6 months without leaving. While Hogwarts was magical and full of fun, he had already explored every accessible area within the semester. not counting the girls' restrooms. Peter was overjoyed to hear that he could still go on missions before the end of the semester. Yes, every semester, outstanding Hogwarts students are required to undertake a challenging mission. Only by completing each semester's challenge can they become the school's top graduates, Tom said in a serious tone. Of course, you can choose to refuse. After all, missions are inherently dangerous. The school doesn't force students to accept them, but those who successfully complete them will receive generous rewards, such as powerful magical items or secret techniques. I want to go. Ned was the first to step forward. Realizing the depth of his talent, he had long since developed an air of dominance. This mission, unqualified for anyone else, a task only he could handle, wasn't it tailor-made for Lord Liz? I'll go too. Peter was a step behind, rather annoyed. Why didn't he speak sooner? Gwen, however, was more cautious and pressed. Headmaster, is the mission difficult? Are there any penalties for failing to complete it? It is certainly difficult, and no one can predict what we'll encounter. Therefore, students are allowed to abandon the mission without any penalty. Tom was well versed in the leader's rhetoric. Everything before the transition was just bullshit. However, the wizarding world is far from peaceful. You've already learned in class that white mages face constant threats. Besides their mortal enemies, the dark mages, there are also the sources of their power, dark creatures and dimensional demons. Thus, wizards who live in a greenhouse are destined to never grow into the backbone of the wizarding world. I accept the mission, Gwen said firmly. With her tenacious character, she never shied away from a challenge. To grow faster and help her father, Gwen had worked tirelessly this semester. There was no reason to back down now. Excellent, Tom smiled with satisfaction. He stood up from his desk, walked to the display shelf, took down 3 potions, and handed them to the 3 of them. Here are 3 healing potions. Take them for protection. Thank you, Principal. X3 Tom returned to his desk, pulled out an envelope, and handed it to the most composed Gwen, instructing, "This is your mission this time, go back and prepare. Meet at the teleportation hall in 15 minutes." The superhero squad, who had often conducted similar operations in Queens, suddenly received a formal mission. They were so excited that they walked with a swift breeze, and eventually broke into a run. In less than 10 minutes, the 3 of them, each carrying their backpack, arrived at the school's teleportation hall. This was a device Lin Hao had borrowed from the teleportation chamber of Kamartaj. He had pre-made portkeys to major countries around the world and Earth. Tom had just personally traveled to Phoenix, the capital of Arizona, and located a blank portkey there. Grab your broomsticks and let's go. Peter and the other 2 used the portkey to reach Phoenix, the capital of Arizona, and immediately soared into the sky on their broomsticks in a deserted area. Despite their youth, the 3 men knew that wizards were rare in America, or indeed anywhere else besides Hogwarts. To complete their mission quickly, they avoided unnecessary complications and planned to avoid contact with anyone else. The target is a desert town to the northwest. Our mission is to investigate the cause of the large number of illnesses among its residents. Gwen naturally took over the captaincy. Peter, though slightly resentful, knew this was their crucial first mission, so he didn't compete with Gwen. They finally reached the desert town after flying their brooms for over an hour. Landing on the outskirts of the town, the 3 hid their brooms in a crevice of a rock, covering them with weeds. After shedding their Hogwarts uniforms and donning ordinary clothes, they walked into the empty, quiet town like ordinary teenagers. Since the headmaster said there are so many patients here, let's go to the hospital first, Gwen said, looking at her 2 teammates. Peter and Ned agreed. This town was once a mining town, with a population of 20,000 to 30,000 at its peak, rivaling many small cities in America. It boasted comprehensive amenities, including dedicated schools and hospitals. However, resource-based cities often suffer from the fate of mining attracts people. Mining disperses the people. As the mineral resources were depleted, the town quickly lost its appeal and became increasingly desolate. Only elderly people reluctant to leave and children without their parents remained. Left behind children aren't unique to China. Young parents struggling to make ends meet are found all over the world. The 3 of them arrived outside the town's largest hospital. Gwen handed out the Bluetooth headsets and walkie-talkies she had prepared to her teammates. I've set up the communication channel. Stay connected at all times. Then, looking at Peter, she suggested, "You're the best at entertaining adults. Go in and pretend to see a doctor. Ned and I will go to the inpatient department in the back." "Okay, that's a task only I can handle," Peter said boastfully. He turned and walked into the outpatient building. Gwen and Ned headed towards the inpatient department in the back. Just as the three little ones were about to make their move, Steve, the adult, and his group had already reached a mining area on the outskirts of town. "Captain, we've got some information," a commoner reported to Steve, who was stationed behind a small hill. The guard at the mine said the chemical company had been dumping waste into the mine. A few days ago, they suddenly stopped, and instead started bringing in live poultry and animals. "It seems someone is using the mine as a slaughterhouse." The guard is always sent away, but he says he can smell blood from a distance. Living creatures. Steve sensed his surroundings, but clearly detected no trace of magic or divine power. After inheriting the throne of Hell Lord, Steve's strength skyrocketed, and his magical perception was now strong enough to cover the entire town. "Let's just charge in. With our fighting power, we can even break into the White House," a short-tempered commoner said impatiently. Steve paused for a moment, then made a decision. "We'll attack after dark to avoid alerting the town's guards." They had already discovered a mysterious group of armed individuals stationed in the town, but because they were scattered and their positions were unclear, Steve hesitated to deal with them. Some people also stay here to fish and see what forces are behind the scenes. Chapter 221 The Magical Spider Team in Action. Inside a desert town's hospital, Peter feigned a stomach ache and ran to the reception desk, crying out to the elderly nurse, "Nurse, my stomach hurts." The elderly nurse looked up from the gossip magazine to the reception desk, where she spotted a boy, about 12 or 13 years old. Initially unconcerned, she was about to point away when, startled, she said, You're not from our town." Peter was stunned. He quickly glanced at the nurse's name tag and said ingratiatingly, "Grandma Samantha, don't you remember me? I'm Ned." The elderly woman looked terrified, winking at Peter repeatedly, her lips moving as if to shout, "Go." "It's dangerous here." Peter, though lively, was by no means stupid. With his keen observation, he was quite astute. Seeing the nurse's reaction, how could he not recognize something was amiss? "Hey, my stomach doesn't seem to hurt anymore," Peter said playfully. "This town hospital is amazing. You feel better the moment you come in." With that, he turned and bounded towards the door. Two bodyguards suddenly appeared at the gate, but they were armed with real weapons, even carrying submachine guns on their backs. They blocked Peter's path and took out a tablet to take his picture. Peter's hand had already reached for his trouser pocket, about to pull out his wand, but then he changed his mind and decided to go deeper into the tiger's den. One of the bodyguards, after comparing the results, exclaimed in surprise, "What's going on? This kid isn't a resident of this town. Are there any foreign vehicles in town today?" Another bodyguard asked, puzzled. "What the hell are those people in the monitoring room doing?" The bodyguard who had spoken first asked angrily. "I think they were drinking and gambling again. It's not our responsibility. Just report it." The two discussed the matter in front of Peter, unfazed by the fear that the kid might get out of control. Peter heard it, and Gwen and Ned, who had already entered the inpatient building behind, also heard it through their intercoms, which were still active. Gwen and Ned exchanged glances when they suddenly heard a soft, rhythmic tapping sound in their earpieces, Morse code. Peter shared his plan to go deeper into the tiger's den with his two teammates. Gwen and Ned, helpless, tapped the intercoms in their trouser pockets to acknowledge their understanding. Then, they quickly separated and rushed to the wards on either side of the hallway. They needed to quickly ascertain the situation in the inpatient department and then rush to rescue Peter. The sudden appearance of the armed bodyguards and their brazen exchange made the three children realize that this hospital and this town were no ordinary place. No wonder the principal had made this a semester assignment. The principal must have noticed something was amiss. Gwen pushed open the door to the inpatient ward and saw 5 beds inside. No nurses, no family members, only 5 elderly patients lying alone in their beds. They were sound asleep, their breathing very weak. Gwen approached and quickly checked the beds and nightstands. Apart from the 5 patients, there was nothing there, not even medical records. Just a cold string of numbers beside the beds, like the labels on pigs in a slaughterhouse. "What's this medicine?" Gwen finally turned her gaze to the liquid medication being administered to the 5 patients. The bottles also had only a string of numbers, without a name or manufacturer. Even though Gwen was only 12 or 13, she knew that medication packaging must include the manufacturer's information. Otherwise, who would she turn to if something went wrong? Such a strange solution must be problematic, perhaps the key to uncovering the cause of the residents' illnesses. Gwen quickly checked several other wards, found a recently completed vial, and quickly removed it. While the liquid wasn't visible to the naked eye, there was enough in the vial to extract residue for testing. Gwen and Ned returned to the stairwell, each holding an empty vial. They shook their heads almost simultaneously, saying in unison, "We haven't found anything else." All the patients are unconscious. Just as they were debating whether to continue to the next floor, a piercing alarm blared throughout the hospital. Gwen and Ned, unconcerned, immediately covered their Bluetooth earpieces, trying to hear what was happening over at Peter's end. "I pretended they knocked me out." Peter was already walking away from the hospital when he heard the alarm blare from behind. "Hurry," Gwen called to Ned. The two quickly exited the inpatient building, not wanting to display too much of their magical powers. The person behind the scenes would undoubtedly mistake the three imps for a group. If they used magic, Peter's disguise would be ruined. During their one semester at Hogwarts, the three children, in addition to learning magic, also took physical education classes with the Hufflepuff headmaster and learned the magical art of Eastern martial arts. Although they lacked internal energy, adolescents were highly adaptable, and with the strengthening effects of potions and food, their physical fitness rivaled that of an average adult. Even running, they could outrun adults. The alarm at the town central hospital echoed far away, alerting the mysterious armed forces stationed there. The once silent town was abuzz with activity thanks to the three imps. The real Steve Rogers, who was staying at the edge of the mining area outside town, heard the noise and immediately turned to look towards the town, inquiring to his teammates, "Are all our people here?" "Everyone's here. The guy who just relieved himself is back," Johnny Blaze replied. Because of the special circumstances surrounding the eunuchs, everyone would deliberately go farther away when relieving themselves. Johnny, the only normal man, would also go farther away when he needed to relieve himself, out of consideration for his teammates. Captain Steve set an example, and the other team members never felt offended. After all, the captain did the same. Strange, why are there alarms going off in town? Steve pondered for a moment, then made a decision. "Wait here, I'll go check it out." Steve was the strongest and most agile member of the team, and since the other team members were all capable, even a temporary absence wouldn't be a major problem. Steve leaped from the hill, his figure so swift it left an afterimage, vanishing from the team's side in an instant. With the added power of the Hell Lord, even outside of Hell, Steve's agility and the sort of exorcism rivaled that of the film's Invincible East. Meanwhile, Peter had been taken to the town's most luxurious villa. "Boss, this is one of the imps. We're catching two more." In the villa's grand living room, a naked man who looked to be in his 30s leisurely sipped a glass of wine. At his feet lay several women, seemingly exhausted and twitching on the carpet. Peter, thrown to the ground, feigned unconsciousness, and just in time, he quietly opened his eyes to witness the horrific scene. "Idiot, this kid isn't even unconscious," scoffed the man in his 30s. Peter, no longer bothering with pretense, leaped to his feet and reached into his wand pocket. Chapter 222 The Battle of the Three Little Ones. This was Peter Parker's first encounter with real danger. Unlike the street thugs he'd encountered before, the armed men before him betrayed a disregard for human life. Although 11-year-old Peter hadn't been bitten by the spider, he had learned magic. Unlike Dumbledore's Hogwarts, Tom Riddle's Hogwarts wasn't designed from the outset to provide children with a happy wizarding childhood. Lin Hao's goal in establishing this school of magic was to train combatants who would challenge world order. Tom's Hogwarts was essentially a military academy. Acting on the reflexes he'd developed during combat simulations, Peter immediately drew his wand. Expelliarmus, the weapons of the two armed men flew towards Peter, but Peter dodged them and cast another spell. Petrify, the two stunned men froze, falling flat on their backs. The leader, who was drinking, reacted quickly, hurling his half-liquid glass at Peter, sending him tumbling over the sofa. "Shit, that kid knows magic," the leader behind the sofa yelled in panic. "Damn it. Help." He'd been so busy exercising that his weapon wasn't on him, leaving it on the coffee table a few meters away. Now, he could only hunker down behind the sofa, not wanting to bet he could outrun the magic kid. He was calling for help, and so was Peter. "Gwen, Ned, I'm at the largest villa west of town." The armed men were incredibly unreliable. They didn't even search Peter, perhaps because he was a child. Within a minute, the armed men stationed inside the villa arrived. Without a word, they pulled to safety and shot Peter, completely ignoring the exhausted woman lying on the carpet. Peter, about to rescue her, jumped back in terror. dodging behind the bar. The shield charm was incredibly difficult. With the exception of Ned, who could learn any spell the minute he saw it, neither Gwen nor Peter had mastered it. In fact, of all 1,600 Hogwarts students, only the exceptionally gifted Ned had mastered this advanced spell. After all, these young wizards had only been in class for one semester. Defenseless, Peter could only hide behind the sturdy bar counter, enduring the barrage of bullets. The militant leader finally had a chance to retrieve his weapon, and in a rage, he immediately pulled the trigger at the bar counter. "Fuck you. Kid, you're dead." Peter's heart raced, his brain short-circuiting as he experienced a hail of bullets for the first time. He was bearing a weight too heavy for his age. His panicked eyes darted around until he caught sight of the carpet covering the entire living room, and a flash of inspiration struck him. Opening the bar counter door and ducking inside, Peter, wand in hand, shouted, "Wingardium Leviosa." This time, he pronounced it correctly. The carpet covering the living room suddenly came alive, trembling like a magic carpet before levitating. "Ah, shit, don't shoot!" Gunfire erupted, accompanied by wailing cries. The unsteady armed men, unable to release their triggers, scrambled their bullets, causing a flurry of casualties and sending everyone on the carpet crashing to the ground. Peter seized the opportunity, leaping forward and firing non-stop. "Eliminate your weapons. Petrify all." The guns flew towards Peter's head. Ouch! Peter, unscathed, was struck by the barrels, leaving a bump on his head. Just then, Gwen and Ned arrived. Shatter! Gwen was the first to wave her wand at the villa's iron gate. The gate burst open, and the two men burst in. "Hey! You're late," Peter said, standing in front of the living room door, a cocky grin on his face. "I've got it all, you little brats." The leader of the armed men clutched his bloodied arm and scrambled to his feet. Petrify all. Gwen cast a spell behind Peter. "Well, it was just an accident," Peter shrugged helplessly, beginning to turn. Gwen glared at him and said urgently, "Let's get out of here. We're being chased." "No, there are so many older women here." Peter shook his head and said quickly, "We should get them out. We can't handle this here," Gwen advised, very rationally. "Once we're safe, let's call the police first, then go back to school and tell the principal." Outside the villa, the roar of engines and the sharp scraping of tires as cars braked could be heard. "Damn it! They're chasing us," Gwen exclaimed. "It's time to show you the power of Uncle Ned." Ned grabbed his wand and excitedly ran behind the villa gate. He hadn't had the chance to strike earlier, and he was a little upset. Hiding behind the wall, Ned extended his fire unicorn wand and shouted. A column of fire over 10 meters long erupted from the tip of the wand, like a flamethrower. "Damn it! Professor Frigga said you can't use the fiery flame curse again," Gwen shouted from behind. "What's the matter? This isn't school." Ned held his wand in both hands, the violent energy dormant in his boyish genes erupting as he swung the pillar of fire. Outside the villa, the assembled armed men were engulfed in flames, and cars exploded one after another, sending shockwaves raging in all directions. "Stop, stop," Gwen shouted as she rushed forward. "The fiery curse will burn everything." "That's perfect, they're the enemy anyway," Ned said excitedly. "But we're still inside. We can't get out without a broom." Gwen finally ran up behind Ned and slapped him on the back of his broad head. Ugh! Ned stopped, stunned. Meanwhile, the flames outside the villa rose high, swishing back toward the villa. Gwen pointed to the large swimming pool, which was at least 100 square meters, and said, "Jump in first." Ned dove in without a word. Peter was about to rush over, but suddenly stopped and ran back to the living room. He carried a limp older woman to the poolside, threw her into the water, and then ran back out. Waterfa. Gwen was confused, but after hesitating for a moment, she made the same choice as Peter. Ned, who had just poked his head out of the water, saw what his two friends did, and had no choice but to swim back to the pool, climbed ashore, and rushed to the living room. The real Steve Rogers, who had already arrived in the town, used magic to transform wings and flew over the flames, just in time to see what the three little ones were doing. He smiled knowingly, leaned over and rushed towards the sea of fire below. Magic surged, and the flames were extinguished in the blink of an eye. Huh? Peter, who rushed out holding another little sister, looked outside the villa, only to see that the sea of fire had disappeared. A blond man walked into the gate of the villa. His face was very familiar, but he seemed to be missing a uniform. Gwen and Ned also rushed out holding the little sister and saw Steve walking towards them. "Brave children, why are you here?" Chapter 223 The Bloody Reality. Peter Parker saw the face, a look of surprise on his face. Captain America, Peter, wait, Gwen Stacy quickly stopped her friend. The flames outside are from the fiery blaze. Ordinary methods can't extinguish them, but this man can douse them in an instant. She cast a wary glance at the real Steve Rogers. I don't recall Captain America knowing magic, so, here's a villain who can transform. Ned Leeds quickly dropped the girl from his shoulder and pulled out his wand. Peter, realizing what was going on, also pulled out his wand, but didn't drop the girl from his shoulder. Take it easy, kids. Steve quickly raised his hands, signaling he meant no harm. I'm not transformed. This is just who I am. I am indeed Steve Rogers, but not the one you often see on TV. I come from another parallel universe, another universe. The three children were stunned. This was beyond their knowledge at their age. This isn't the place to talk. The bad guys' reinforcements will be here soon. Steve pointed in the direction of the mining area and suggested, my friends are over there. You can come with us. No need. We'll call the police and leave, Gwen said. She had her own thoughts. She had no faith in the man who looked like Captain America. The police can't help you. Steve's voice trailed off. Thinking it over, he decided it wasn't right to expose the children to harsh realities so early. He changed his tone. If you want to call the police, remember not to use your phone and don't reveal your identification or home address, and get out of this town as soon as possible. With that advice, Steve turned and left. These three children were clearly not ordinary people. The ones they held were clearly those of the magic school in England. As an international student in Asgard, Steve knew Queen Frigga and knew she was currently a teacher at Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry. Since they were not ordinary people, they could leave safely without his care. Gwen, upon hearing Steve's words, suddenly realized what was happening and called out to him, "Excuse me, do you know what's going on in this town? Why are there so many patients in the town hospital? Are they truly ill?" The principal's assignment was to uncover the reason for the surge in illnesses. The two bottles in his hand were at most clues, not mission accomplished. Since he'd accepted the task, he had to do his best. If he could get the answers from this man who called himself Captain America from another time and space, wouldn't that be mission accomplished? Gwen wasn't a pedantic child. She knew how to accomplish her mission directly, and wouldn't resort to further risk. You guys, Steve turned, sizing up the three kids, quickly realizing, is that why you're here? Hogwarts was far away in England. Three students from a magic school wouldn't have come to a desert town in Arizona for no reason. Yes, it's her semester assignment, Peter blurted out. Peter, Gwen glared at him. Peter, realizing what was happening, quickly stuck out his tongue and held his finger up to his mouth. Steve smiled, hesitated for a moment, and finally made up his mind. If you want the answer, follow me. Coming from the battlefield, he knew full well that what he was about to do would affect millions of children. What did these three more mean? The three children exchanged glances and chose to follow. This was their mission, after all. Before leaving, Peter ran to the pool to retrieve the young girl he had just thrown in, then found blankets for all the girls and covered them with him. The street outside the villa was scorched by the firecrackers. If Steve hadn't put out the flames, the surrounding buildings would have been destroyed. Steve seemed familiar with the town and headed straight for a factory behind the hospital. Most of the armed personnel stationed in the town had perished under the firecrackers. The few who remained inside the factory, having not left even when their leader had called for help. Who are you? Outside the factory gates, bunkers were set up, and guards on high ground, machine guns mounted on high ground. Seeing the three children approach, they all turned their weapons on them. Before the three children could raise their wands, Steve waved his hand, and all the weapons flew into the air, colliding and twisting into a ball by an unknown force. A red light emanated from Steve's hand, striking the guards and instantly rendering them unconscious. The power of the Hell Lord was easily enough to take down a few minor figures. Cool. He feels as powerful as the principal, Peter whispered from behind. Impossible. The principal is definitely more powerful than him. At most, Ned thought for a moment and offered his own assessment. He's more powerful than a few deans, a mature little boy. Gwen shook her head and hurried a few steps, unwilling to be associated with him. After entering the factory, Steve led them to a row of laboratories, where researchers in white coats busied themselves, seemingly unaware of what was happening outside. Who are they? Gwen asked. A group of pharmacologists, researching a new drug. Steve answered their question, The patients in the hospital are just the test subjects they use to test the drug's effects. Steve's tone was calm. After witnessing the dark side of this country, he found himself surprisingly at peace with himself. Compared to the sheer scale of events like the massacre of civilians in their own community and the bombing of their own cities, what did a mere human experiment on a small town mean? The three children were visibly stunned by his words. Experimenting with a new drug, Peter muttered, bewildered. Is that a good thing or a bad thing? If it can cure illnesses, then it should be a good thing, right? Ned chimed in. It wasn't their fault. They were just too young, and these things were beyond their comprehension. Are you idiots? Gwen's face darkened, and she angrily demanded, participation in a new drug experiment requires voluntary participation. Do you think the townspeople are volunteering? Peter and Ned finally realized. They're forcing the residents to participate in the drug experiment. More than forced, they're coerced, Gwen raged. They've taken over the entire town with armed men, forcibly injecting the residents. The empty medicine bottle in her hand seemed to mock the three little kids for only just discovering the truth. That's why this town is so deserted, and that's why the lady at the hospital reception told me to run. Peter, equally furious, gnashed his teeth. Damn it. They're committing a crime. Thank goodness, I didn't kill the wrong person just now. Ned's mind was only on this, and the pressure he'd felt from casting the fiery curse instantly vanished. Let's call the police now and have them arrest all these bad guys, Peter shouted. Gwen, however, turned her gaze to Steve and asked, you told us not to use our phones to call the police because these three kids are truly extraordinary. Steve sighed to himself and quickly replied, it's obvious that they can control this town. They must have enormous power in the region and throughout Arizona. The police might not dare to intervene. Even, they might be in cahoots. Finally, the bloody reality was revealed, and the three young children were faced with it directly. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelis. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 224 Another demon is coming to America. Are there so many bad guys in Arizona? Peter Parker wondered. Aren't cowboys on TV good characters? You said they were on TV. Gwen Stacy glared at him. The three children didn't feel a shock from hearing these harsh truths, because their perspectives were still forming. Their perception of reality depended on what they saw. Since they're bad guys, just eliminate them all, Ned Leeds said recklessly, drawing his wand. Children's perceptions of good and evil are naive, but this innocence can often lead to dire consequences, especially for those with extraordinary powers. No, these people have other purposes. Steve quickly stopped him. The real mastermind will be here soon. Only by catching him can we put an end to this. If we don't just end this place, how many other towns like this are there in America? Thinking of this, Steve had no choice but to remain steadfast in his belief in strengthening the Lone Star Republic and bringing true equality and freedom to America. Okay, Ned listened, putting away his wand. What about the patients in the hospital? Gwen said compassionately. We should go save them. Sorry, their bodies are already beyond saving. Steve sighed. He'd already checked, and even with the power of the Lord of Hell, he could only guide their souls, not their broken bodies. Damn the bad guys, Peter raged. Let's leave first. The masterminds will search the entire town when they arrive. Steve led the group out of the factory and out of town. Your mission is complete. Leave now. He didn't want the children to stay any longer. No, the bad guys haven't been eliminated yet, Peter said, fearing that team members would object. Yes, I can do more, Ned said, eager to try. Although he had killed the most people just now, he still felt unsatisfied, perhaps because the killing was too easy, without the thrill of it. I can't stand you, Gwen agreed reluctantly. Eliminate the mastermind and then return to school immediately. Then, looking at Steve, she assured him, we won't bother you. Do whatever you want. The mastermind who would arrive was likely just a powerful, ordinary person. Considering the power of the three little brats, Steve felt they didn't need his protection. Okay, be careful. The two sides separated. Steve ran back outside the mine, while the three little brats ran back to where the brooms were hidden to retrieve the items. The sun set in the west, and the sky gradually darkened. In the evening, a large convoy arrived in the town. A large number of armed men jumped out of the vehicles and quickly searched the town. They had lost contact with a troop stationed in the town for several hours, so they naturally knew something was wrong. Mr. Cliff, your secret base appears to have been invaded. A middle-aged man with a pale face and no beard stepped out of the luxury RV, holding a Western-style longsword. Behind him, the gray-haired Cliff Waters stepped down and said nonchalantly, "They're just pawns. It doesn't matter if they all die, as long as Mr. Rupert is sure your method is effective. This town will no longer be necessary, of course. Isn't the sacrifice already prepared?" Rupert Wood smiled. Tonight was a full moon night, and the bright moon quietly climbed into the sky. High in the sky, the three little ones, circling on their flying brooms, felt a little cold. "Gwen, when do we start?" Ned's fat body trembled. "Look, they seem to be transporting something to the hilly area." Gwen pointed down and added, "That's probably the mining area. Does it have anything to do with us?" Peter was puzzled, rubbing his arms and asking anxiously, "After we eliminate the bad guys, we'll go straight back to school. Don't you want to know what the bad guys are going to do?" Gwen's eyes gleamed, and she said with absolute certainty, "They must be planning something big." The armed men in the town had been eliminated, but the new bad guys, after just a brief search, were busy transporting something to the mining area, as if this matter was more important than their potential enemies. This was unusual. "Let's follow them and see." This time it was Gwen's turn to take the initiative. She had always been adventurous, otherwise why would she have joined the seemingly bizarre superhero team in the first place? Steve had already cast a magical barrier on the hill outside the mining area, and the search teams passed by them without finding anyone. They were well fed and well rested, waiting for the real boss to arrive. "Shall we start now?" Johnny Blaze asked Steve. "Let's see what they're up to first." Steve shook his head. If a little girl like Gwen could understand, how could Steve, a veteran, not know? A group of armed men burst into the town's hospital and carried the unconscious patients onto a truck parked outside the hospital, like they were carrying pigs. The truck drove into the mining area, where they placed the patients on our truck, started the engine, and drove deep into the mine. "Damn it," Johnny glared, gritting his teeth. "They're probably going to kill these patients, whether it was to destroy evidence or for ulterior motives." These men treated the unconscious patients so roughly that it was obvious they weren't going to take them to the mines to enjoy a good life. Heaven would be more like a good life. "Follow them." Steve couldn't sit still. Just because he couldn't save the patient's health didn't mean he could sit idly by and watch them be slaughtered. A green light enveloped all his teammates, distorting the enemy's vision and keeping his team invisible. This was a common magic used by Loki. The three flying creatures didn't see Steve and his group. They waited until all the armed men had entered the mine before descending and quietly following. Rupert, with his white, beardless face and sword in hand, walked in front. He surveyed the familiar mine, a glint of nostalgia in his eyes. This wasn't his first time in the mine. 20 years ago, as a young man, he'd worked there, a difficult and unforgettable experience. Unable to endure the harsh, seemingly endless days, he disobeyed his miner father's wishes and, with his hard-earned savings, headed for New York to pursue his dream. What happened next was a familiar story. The American dream isn't just a myth for foreigners, it's also true for locals. With no education, no connections, and no money, Rupert quickly faced reality. Unable to find work, he became a street vendor. After just 2 days, he offended a local gang by stealing food from someone else's property, earning him a beating. That time, he lost not only his dignity but also his very identity as a man. After his loss, Rupert found a new job. Leveraging his youthful physique and delicate features, he gradually rose to become the top player in his name's club. It was a case of God closing a door and opening a window. He continued to be worked like this until he grew old and ugly. Rupert was once again facing unemployment. Fortunately, a remarkable figure named Dongfang Bubei arrived in America and offered Rupert another chance. Recruited into Valentina de La Fontaine's organization, he demonstrated a remarkable aptitude for martial arts, mastering the exorcism sword technique to its limits in just 4 or 5 months. He then participated in the invasion of Kamartaj. As a middle-aged man who had long seen through the fickleness of the world, Rupert firmly believed in the doctor's advice: in life, you must rely on yourself. So, like Adam Smith, he began scavenging magical artifacts even before the battle was over. He eventually followed Adam into the Ancient One's library and stole several magic books. However, he lacked the confidence to force his way back to New York through the teleportation chamber, but fortunately, He found a portal to Kathmandu. A few days ago, he returned to America and learned the contents of the magic book through translation. He instantly thought of the mine from back then. This place perfectly met the summoning requirements. I just realized that Kidian's editor-in-chief's promotion cycle is only 1 day. Okay, I'll try to update more often and finish this major event as soon as possible. I originally thought there would be a week-long recommendation period. Chapter 225 Great Weaver, please come. 20 years ago, Rupert Wood stumbled upon a swarm of giant spiders in the mine where he worked. The spider incident shut down the entire mine for 3 days, costing Rupert, a newly hired worker, 3 days' wages, a memory he vividly cherished. Later, after finding work in New York, he returned home several times, only to hear his father tell him that the spiders in the mine hadn't disappeared. In fact, they had grown larger. However, these spiders lacked any special abilities, and their size was well within the reach of human machinery. The mine owner clearly wouldn't abandon his vast industry for a swarm of spiders. He would periodically clean up the area and continue mining until the mine was completely depleted. A few years ago, Rupert returned again for the funeral of his long-widowed father. That time, he discovered a new factory building behind the town hospital, and the abandoned mine had become a dumping ground for chemical waste. The dumping of chemical waste in abandoned mines is common in America and around the world, and is more common in countries with stricter environmental policies. Because the cost of harmlessly disposing of chemical waste is prohibitive, countries with less environmental awareness are free to dump it wherever they want. However, countries with stricter regulations often place a heavy burden on chemical companies. To save money, these companies have turned to abandoned mines. The deeper and wider the mines, the more attractive they are to chemical companies. Dumping waste into the mines, then exploding them with explosives once they're full, solves a major problem at minimal cost. Many countries even legalize this disposal method as a standard practice. Rupert doesn't have much of an environmental perspective. However, on his last trip home, he noticed not only a high rate of illness among the town's elderly, but also a massive spider near the mining area, several times larger than the one he'd encountered before. It was so terrifying that he fled. This incident was supposed to be just one of his most negative memories, but fate twisted things. He was chosen to practice the Evil-Repelling Sword technique, participated in the invasion of Kamartaj, and acquired several magic books. It just so happened that these magic books, placed on the same shelf, all described the power of the spider god, describing its powers and even providing detailed instructions on how to summon and borrow its power. Translating the contents of the magic books reminded Rupert of his hometown and this mining area. The fact that giant spiders had survived in the mines after all these years meant there must be one or more large spider dens deep within, perhaps even a spider king. The magic books solemnly warned future mages of Kamartaj that allowing the power of the spider god to descend upon a large spider would allow it to survive and achieve its goal of transcending dimensions. This was a warning to Kamartaj mages, but for Rupert, it became a practical guide. In his ignorance, he believed that the greater the spider god's power, the better, and the greater the benefits he would receive. So, upon returning to America from Nepal, Rupert rushed back to his hometown, only to find it even more deserted than it had been a few years before. The hospital was filled with more patients, with nearly the entire town's elderly residents residing there. He immediately realized someone was plotting something fishy. Americans have always had little love for their hometowns. Rupert left home early, and his father's death severed his last remaining ties. Although he recognized some of the elderly people in the ward, his memories were already fading. Far from seeking revenge for them, Rupert viewed these locals as the perfect sacrifices. He interrogated the town's guards and learned the identity of the perpetrators. Unsurprisingly, it was a Phoenix-based pharmaceutical company. Rupert traveled to the capital, Phoenix, and approached Cliff Waters, proposing a partnership. After Rupert demonstrated his prowess, Cliff calmly accepted the offer and provided him with initial support. Yes, the chemical plant also belonged to Cliff's. Lately, the trucks had stopped transporting chemical waste and instead were hauling various live animals and homeless people captured from nearby cities. Combined with the town's existing residents, Rupert felt the quantity and quality of his offerings would undoubtedly bring him immense power. Driven by a thirst for power, Rupert inched deeper into the mine, stopping at a relatively spacious junction. Various sacrifices had been prepared, and a large number of the live animals brought in over the past few days still survived. "Rupert, please, Cliff extended his hand. Rupert then ordered Cliff's men to begin slaughtering the animals, even the living. Suddenly, the deep stench of blood filled the air from the depths of the mine. Rupert used the scalding blood to carve a well-remembered magic circle on the bare ground. In the mines beyond, Steve and the others, unfamiliar with the route, smelled the blood. Damn, they've already started. This way, a commoner with a keen sense of smell stepped forward to point the way. Shortly after they left, the three little ones, riding their broomsticks, arrived at the same location. Gwen, are you taking the right route? Peter scratched his head. I've never been here before, and these mines all look the same. Gwen, rarely embarrassed, her face etched with displeasure. To avoid detection, they slightly increased their tracking distance. She had thought she could just follow the minecart tracks, but they forked, each tunnel having its own track. I smell blood, Ned shrugged, pointing to tunnel. This way, are you sure? Gwen feared another mistake. If they couldn't find the man, not only would they be unable to determine the villain's purpose, they might even lose their way out. They might become the first wizards in Hogwarts history to die trapped in a mine after getting lost. Don't worry, Ned's nose can pick up the scent of Granger hot dogs from 3 blocks away. Peter, clearly confident in his best friend's nose, lowered his broom and followed. Granger was the name of a food truck that once operated outside a school in Queens, specializing in hot dogs. Ned would eat one every day he went to school, rain or shine. Every day before school ended, Ned, still in the classroom, would smell a Granger hot dog and know it was almost time to leave. He was always the first to rush out. Such a far-fetched excuse left Gwen helpless, but she had no choice but to follow. Unexpectedly, Ned's nose was indeed reliable. They soon heard a noise coming from the front. Great Weaver, Master of the Spider Totem, Lord Spider God, please come, Rupert shouted loudly with a pious expression. Steve no longer cared about pretending and shouted, stop. He wondered what these guys were up to. But they actually ran into the mine to perform a sacrifice to the evil god. While studying in Asgard, Steve learned from books about the nature of cosmic magic. Most magicians gained power by borrowing from dimensional demons. The power of Queen Frigga and Loki was the same, except that it did not come from a specific demon, but from the world tree that connected the 9 realms, which was also a powerful existence. The noise made by these guys was clearly a sacrifice to the evil god. Why an evil god? A proper god should be more careful about his eating habits. How could he ask his followers to kill a living person for sacrifice? Rupert, who was in the center of the summoning circle, remained unmoved and forcefully poured out the last bucket of blood. Sleep, sleep. End of this chapter. Thank you very much for reaching the end. Don't forget to like. Looking for more exclusive content and immediate access? Subscribe to our Patreon. Remember, every like, subscription, or donation encourages us to continue. Thanks to everyone, see you in the next video.